And we welcome you to this live edition of In the Circle on Saturday night. We don't have a musical performance, but I am Eric Lopez.
Thank y'all. We don't.
That's Victor Anderson. And then Justin McLeod from Justin's World, our special guest. He'll be kind of with us throughout the entire show, but we got multiple guests coming up momentarily. We'll have Kenzie Fowler, Arizona All-American, will be joining us, multiple-time All-American. We'll be talking to her about the Pac-12. We'll be joined by Gray Robinson to the Out of the Box to talk about the SEC. And then, of course, Justin will also be breaking down some of the storylines throughout the season. Make sure you like and subscribe to us on our In the Circle YouTube page. And, of course, you can have comments. You can leave us comments here throughout the live show here tonight. Victor, tell the audience where they can find us on YouTube as well as our podcast.
Yeah, so you can find our podcast wherever you listen on your favorite streaming platform. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Search at In the Circle SB. There will be comments in the chat section where you can ask questions to Eric, Justin, myself, or our guest Kenzie or Gray. We'll try to get to those as best as we can. And don't forget, you can message us on our social media, both on our Twitter and Facebook at In the Circle SB. And we'll try and get those questions to you as quickly as the show allows us to do so.
There's no truth to the rumor that Vic's video is in the dark because of Division II and Division III is kind of in the dark right now for their season, but that's a whole other story. Considering
Division II is playing this weekend, I cannot confirm that is the reason why you're not seeing me at this point in time. By the way, we want to send our thoughts and wishes to Union Athletics. That one of their softball players suffered a very tough injury today playing Alabama Huntsville. So we want to send our thoughts and prayers out to the Union Athletics softball team and their family, and we wish the player a full recovery.
That's right. No, we'll certainly add that. Well, we are now less than a week away from Division I college softball 2021 season starting. It's been almost 300 days, I think, since we last saw a college softball game in Division I. But joining us now, one of the greats. What a fitting person to make history. She's made history in her throughout her entire career in Arizona, multiple time All-American, led him to the Women's College World Series in 2010. You know her as the Pac-12 analyst. And our friend here on In the Circle, Kenzie Fowler, joining us now live. How you doing? Are you excited here? We got a week to go before softball, finally.
Hey, guys. Can you see me? Am I on? Am I good?
Yes, you are good. You're
okay.
Looking, yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm so excited. Oh, my gosh. It doesn't really feel real just because of the year that we've had. I don't know about you guys, but I'm just trying to amp myself up that it's okay, it's actually happening. It's not some fever dream. No, this is actually happening. So I'm really excited.
What, as a former athlete, what do you think is going through their mind here? It's been since March that many of these players have had an actual game against an opponent. Some of them have had, unique falls in spring. What are you kind of looking and thoughts as we're here on the verge of the season starting and what we might expect?
I mean, I just can't think about missing my fall. And even though you're not playing other, Division I teams, you're playing the JUCO teams or the local D2 teams. I just can't fathom this long without pitching against someone other than your teammates. I mean, the off season is rough when you're having to scrimmage every single day against, the people I had to pitch against, my own teammates, like Holly Wilson, Brittany Lestraps, Chelsea Goodacre. It just sucks. So I can't imagine the off season that they've had without anybody in the other batter's box. I mean, it's been so long for them.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Now let's talk about one of the storylines. And really, we had some news earlier this week. The Pac-12 announced their schedule finally. I don't know if you were getting nervous as we were trying to wonder and wait to see what the Pac-12 would do. They've come out with their schedule. They're going to go with a 4-game series. Now, 3 of them will count. So this is kind of getting a little complicated. If they get all 4 games in, the second game of the doubleheader will not count towards conference. If they only get 3 games in, then all 3 will count towards conference. It's a little unique, but what's your reaction to the Pac-12's decision on that?
I believe the ACC is doing it too. I looked around and tried to – I know the Big Ten, their schedule I don't think is out yet unless it dropped and I didn't pay attention. But I think it's smart. I think it's a good backup plan. I mean, we've seen what's happened, with the other sports in the other seasons. So, I mean, there are games that you're going to have to reschedule. It's just inevitable. These things are going to happen. So I think it's a smart plan to have, just to try and beat, the things that are going to happen and get ahead of the game, so to speak. So I think it's smart.
So with that, do you think there's a team in the Pac-12 that benefits from those extra games more than any other, or do you think it's like equal for everybody, or somebody gets maybe hurt more by that? I'm very fascinated by that expanding of games, if it benefits or hurts anybody in the league.
It benefits you if you have pitching. The teams that don't have pitching, oh my gosh, I cannot. I mean, I think about back to pitching, and we didn't have the pitching staffs that you see now. It was, me and maybe one other girl and maybe a utility girl if we were lucky. So we had really small pitching staffs. And these teams, I'm looking at the rosters, they have 4 pitchers, 5 maybe even with some freshmen that are coming in. Still, I don't know if it's enough. 4 games in a row, that 3rd game in a series is always so rough. So I can't fathom as a pitcher, knowing that you're facing a UCLA, Arizona, Oregon, Washington for 4 straight games. I think we're going to see a lot of split games just because mentally 4 games is a lot for pitchers. I can just put myself mentally, just say, okay, you're going to pitch innings 1 and 2 on game 1. You're going to pitch, innings 5, 6, and 7 on game 3, and you're going to start, game 4. I feel like we're going to see a lot of strategic innings for the pitchers because it's going to be rough 4 games in a row.
So you mentioned, obviously, everybody talks about UCLA, the unanimous number 1. They get Rachel Garcia, Bubba Nichols back. Washington gets everybody back. They're loaded. Gabby Plain and Sis Bates and company. Arizona, they're also 3 in the top 5. Is it those 3 and everybody else, or do you think somebody else in the Pac-12 can join that party there in the Pac-12?
No, I think those 3 I expect those 3 to compete for a national championship. I mean, if those 3 are not in the Women's College World Series, it will be considered, a disappointing season. So yes, it's those 3, and then it's a separation. Just to touch on UCLA really quick, I think that's the team that everyone's looking at right now this year. I'm just going to throw it out there before we even have the season. I think this could be arguably the most talented collegiate team we will ever see in history. Not even for UCLA history. I mean, you would think that the best team in UCLA history would probably be the best team nationally. So it's just insane what they're going to be able to put on the field. I don't expect them to be perfect just because of the season that 2021 is going to have. We're going to have a lot of up and downs, and it's going to be a roller coaster ride. But I think this is the most talented team we could ever see in softball.
Rachel Garcia and Bubba Nichols, obviously they weren't part of 2020. They were with the Olympic team. They're back. How do you think, it sounds like a weird question, but how do they fit in again with the team? Because a lot of players grew up in their absence in 2020. I mean, Rachel doesn't have to carry the load and the pitching staff like she did a couple of years ago. How do you see that blending in, and how is UCLA now going to be with the depth that they have, adding now Bubba and Rachel?
So scary. I think the fact that they had such a long off season, I think their chemistry will be fine, especially because their 5th year, Rachel Garcia, maybe 6th year, if I'm thinking correctly, 6th-year senior. So they've been around and they know the girls. So I think chemistry wise, it'll be fine because of the long off season and how much, isolation there's been for each team. It's kind of like one of those things where, yes, they're isolated from so much because of COVID, but at the same time, it's like your teammates may be all you have right now. So that chemistry, I think, is going to be really key. So I don't expect it to be weird. I think it'll be seamless, and it'll seem like, it's 2019 all over again.
Arizona, a lot of excitement there, top 5 offensively. We just had Caitlin Lowe, who's, by the way, it's her birthday today. And Taryn Moat on recently and in the circle. And they talked about the depth they have, especially in offense. What's your thoughts on their pitching staff? Is their pitching staff good enough to knock off UCLA and not only win the Pac-12, but you mentioned the national championship?
Oh, I mean, on paper, no, they're not. I mean, Mariah Lopez and Alyssa Denham are top 4, 1-2 punch, top 3, maybe even with how talented they are. They're so good. But you're talking about Rachel Garcia, who's, a once in a generation player, and Megan Framo, who in my opinion was the top pitcher in the Pac-12 conference. So on paper, they're not as good, but that doesn't mean that you still can't win a national championship. They're plenty good to get there. It's just, are they going to be healthy and, provide the right combinations? And their offense is insane. So their offense is going to be a defense in a way. And I think with how good their offense is going to be, it's going to take some pressure off of Lopez and Denham, because they're going to be putting up runs every single game. So I think that helps as well.
Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, Kinsey, I'm just curious, you being a pitcher, how much value does it give for Deja Mulapola to come back and to have that veteran presence behind the plate? Last year you had the young players, now you got Mulapola back. How big of a difference does that make for the Arizona pitching staff?
Oh, it's huge. I'm really excited for Deja to be back. Weird not having the Olympics. I was bummed for her, but then how it worked out, she gets to end up with her senior class, and it's a big senior class for Arizona. And her and Mariah grew up together. They were on the same club team, and so they're getting to end together as a battery. And I know Mariah is really excited to have Deja and just get this season together, because they played so many club ball years together. So I think it's really special for Mariah, and she's really amped up. And it, as a pitcher, knowing that you have a catcher who's on the Olympic team who's catching Kat Osterman, there's a certain swagger and confidence that gives you. So yeah, that's a huge get for Coach Candrea having Deja back.
Washington has, of course, a lot of players back. Sis Bates Company, Gabby Plain, Morgan Flores. They've kind of been knocking on the door. They've been there at Oklahoma City, right there on the door. I guess the question is, how do they get over the hump? Is that the key question you have for Washington this season?
Yeah, I expect them to make it to the Women's College World Series. I don't know if they have the pitching depth to take it all the way. Gabby Plain's one of the top 5 pitchers in the nation, but this is a season where if you have one ace, it's not going to be enough. You're going to have multiple. Kelly Lynch was really impressive last year. I don't know if she can jump to the tier that we're talking about, the level of a Gabby Plain, Alyssa Denham, Rachel Garcia. So that's just a little bit of a question for me, is their depth in the circle. Of course, their defense is going to be so solid. They're so good year in and year out. And they have some big bats that were getting going. Kelly Lynch was one of them last year. And so I'm excited to see Washington. You know that they always have athletic freshmen coming in. And I'm excited to see where they're going to be playing defensively, because I think they have some versatile players that may be fighting for some spots.
Oregon's fascinating, right? They kind of was having that great season with Coach Lombardi in 2020 before the season came in. We had her on. I think that momentum will carry over to 2021. And if there is a team that could spoil the party a little bit, I think it is Oregon now, right?
Yeah, I expect Oregon to make it to Supers. I think they're good enough to make a Supers. I expect them to take a game from UCLA. I expect them to take a game from Arizona. I don't expect them to take the series, but I expect them to make those top 3 teams really work for it. And I expect them to take care of business kind of on the other half of the conference. So I have them sitting at 4th in the conference. Their pitching depth is solid. I honestly, this sounds really weird, but I have more confidence in Oregon's pitching depth than I do Washington's. Of course, there's so much youth on this Oregon team, so I don't really know what their lineup is going to look like. I know they're versatile. I know they're athletic. I know that their lineup on day one is not going to be their lineup, I think, on day in May. So I think there's going to be a lot of interchangeable lineups for Coach Lombardi, which makes it really exciting.
Couple coaching interesting moves in the offseason here. Chelsea Spencer back at Cal. She's the new head coach at California. And then Jimmy Kalitis back in the Pac-12. He joins Arizona State as an assistant for Tricia Ford. Let's start with Spencer. Your thoughts on her at Cal?
Yeah, I'm so excited for her. That was a big coaching job in the off season, and was one of the biggest storylines in college. So to get her back and get her in Cal, it's kind of weird for Cal because they're rebuilding their program physically with coaching, with new players. They're redoing the field. So I feel like this is a rebuilding year in every single aspect. They may struggle a little bit this year. I know that they have a really big roster. Their roster's at like 26. I think it's the biggest roster in the conference. So that could benefit her, and just use this year and say, hey, we're going to figure out who's the future. What do we need for recruiting going into next year? Maybe they need to hit the portal in some different areas. But I don't want to say it's a throwaway year. It's not going to be a throwaway year, but it could be a year for those 26 players on this roster, completely fresh start. Let's go earn a spot.
And then you got Jimmy now back in the Pac-12.
Yep.
What do you think that means for Coach Ford and having him back in the Pac-12?
Well, it means that the ASU offense that was already so good is just going to be better. I mean, everywhere he goes, he produces hitters. So when I saw him, I was like, no way. There's no way that they got Jimmy to ASU. So that was really exciting. That offense is always so good year in and year out. It's going to have to be good again. The Hackbarth sisters are back. Kendra Hackbarth's one of the top 10 hitters in the nation. She's just dynamite. I don't know about their pitching. I'm going to be honest. Cielo Mesa, she's their ace. She was looking really good last year after having kind of a down 2019 for her standards. And so her season got cut short, and I think she was bummed about that because of the way that she was going. So I expect her to kind of pick that up again. But I don't really know who's behind her. It's kind of a mystery at this point. They have some young pitchers that don't have a ton of experience, some new freshmen that I'm sure Coach Ford is going to have to work her pitching magic. That's what she does. She works with the pitchers. So they're going to have to hit, but we know they can. I mean, we know they can hit, but they're going to have to do it like consistently in those clutch moments.
Justin with the question here.
Hey, Kenzie, one thing I'm curious about, with as many great rosters as are in the Pac-12, Washington, Arizona, UCLA, and so deep, are there any dangers to having so many teams that are that stacked, all in the same conference, all playing 4 games against one another in the regular season?
Yes.
Or is it all positives for them?
No, I think it depends. We've seen the committee reward teams that have really good records, but then of course you go deep into it and you analyze it and you're like, they didn't really play any tough teams. So I think it helps build that competition. But at some point, UCLA and Arizona and Washington and Oregon, they're thinking, all right, come on. Like when they see each other on the weekends, weekend in and weekend out, and 4 games, you're talking, you could have a stretch of 12 games against the top 3 teams in the nation. That's brutal. I don't think it's going to hurt like a ton, but it helps and it hurts. I don't know. It depends. You know what I mean? We've seen the committee go both ways about it and reward teams for having those high RPI points. And then we've also seen them reward teams that have a really good record. So it just depends how lucky you get, I guess.
I'm kind of curious. Who do you think is going to have the edge here early in the season? Do you think the hitters are going to be have an advantage on the pitchers, or the pitchers having an edge on the hitters? Considering this is such a unique spring and fall where protocols and things like that. I know some coaches we've had on us talked about concern about some rust. Even who do you think has the advantage?
I think hitters. I think hitters will have the advantage at the beginning, just because they've been doing so much of that. Pitching is something where you've got to get in a rhythm. I remember in seasons, my first couple of games were never not great, but they were never like super good. It takes you a couple of games to get in your rhythm and feel pitching against someone that's not your teammate. Because you have all these scrimmages where you're pitching against your teammates and you get into a flow of, okay, this is how I pitch her. And then you're going to play somebody that's new and it's completely different. So I think the pitchers will take a minute to get warmed up. I think the hitters will come out just like so amped up, so ready to swing, so ready to see another pitcher, and they'll just go crazy.
Let's talk about the other Pac-12 teams. Utah, they have a Gasso now on their staff. One of the sons of Patty Gasso. They were kind of having a good season, too, before the season came to an end.
They were.
You have Oregon State, Mason, their ace pitcher, comes back for Laura Berg and company. Stanford, Jessica Allister, still building that Cardinal program. They made the tournament in 2019. What's your thoughts on those three teams?
Utah was looking really good. I know Coach Hogue was really excited about the youth that was coming in, and I know they had another big class of true freshmen now come in. They were fast, they were scrappy, much improved. They were deep. I don't know how deep their pitching staff is going to be. I don't think that they have the luxury that the Oregon and Arizona and Washington, UCLA has. So I think they'll be competing right in the middle of the Pac-12 with ASU, just because I think they are scrappy enough to hang in every single game that they play. I just don't know if they have the pitching depth to take it.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be fascinating with Stanford, Oregon State, and
that's a very question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing I'm curious about. With this expanded schedule, is there enough wins for those teams, especially Oregon State, the Utahs, to get into the tournament? I think it's the thing I'm most fascinated by.
Yeah, because especially if you're looking at a team like Stanford right now on their schedule, they don't have any non-conference games. They just got onto campus 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, like you're saying, you're going into conference playing these teams that are going to be the top 5 teams in the nation, and you're looking for enough wins to get into the tournament. I mean, Stanford is a team that I think will be good enough, talented enough to make it into the regionals. How does it shake out with the scheduling? I don't know. There's a lot we're going to figure out a lot. I'm sure that things are going to change every week, like everything has been. But I don't know how it's going to end up.
Well, have we seen this with football and basketball? Yeah. You've seen this up close. How many games do you get in? Obviously, college basketball's had about 80% games in, which means they've had to lose 20% games have been either postponed or canceled. Football had their deals. And I think that's what's so fascinating being on the West Coast with everything that's been going on. I'm really fascinated how many of these games they get in for the Pac-12. The big positive, I guess, for them is, though, they're so stacked, and maybe that's part of the reason they expanded the schedule as far as including a number of games, because they felt by playing each other that could help their resume better. Yeah,
I mean, when you do play a team 4 times, chances of you going 0-4, not great. You probably will get in 1, so unless it's a super big disparity. But I mean, it's hard to beat a team twice. It's hard to beat a team 3 times. So you're exactly right. Maybe that's kind of the strategy behind it. Just get as many games as they can in while they're there. Stanford, I don't know what their schedule is going to look like, but I know that, with like volleyball just had their first, they played here in Arizona. I was working the game and it was their first game. They just started late because the regulations up in their county and they haven't been able to practice. And so it's a disadvantage for the Cardinal.
One of the big storylines on the field, Jesse Harper, 20 home runs away, I believe, from Lauren Chamberlain's record. I remember you were on with me. It was literally the last episode. It was the last episode before the season came to an end. And you actually were like a foreshadowing. He's like, I hope we still get to play. I know.
I remember saying on the podcast, I hope we get the Olympics in.
Yes.
And after I said that, I was like, that was too negative. And then they got canceled. I was like, oh shoot.
So yeah, you're a prophet. Maybe I should. So maybe you could foreshadow for us how many games we get in. But your thoughts?
All of them.
Yes, good, very good. What do you think of Jesse Harper? Does she break the Chamberlain record? And then obviously there's been some chatter. Should there be an asterisk? Should there not? I don't know where you fall under all of that. But your thoughts on Harper here getting an opportunity here to break the record, but back more importantly to help Arizona try to win the national title?
Yeah, the debate with the asterisk against the record, it's not that it makes me mad, but it's just why should we even have that conversation? She didn't ask for the season to be canceled. She's had the longest off season that any of these former home run hitters have had. So disadvantage her because of COVID and because of this season. And I don't think that we should be saying, oh, she broke it, but she had this extra year. so many players have had redshirt years. So my sister was one of those players. She tore her ACL right before the redshirt year, and I remember talking to her. She's like, "Do I get to keep my RBIs?" And we're like, "Yeah, you get to keep them." She was like, "Great," and it helped her. Ended up being an academic All-American, and so there's so many players that have those extra, 20 games before they redshirt. It's just part of the game. It happens. I hate that it's a part of the conversation about her because she's just one of the hardest workers. I know her pretty well being in Tucson, and I can tell you that she's not thinking about it. I can tell you that she is all in on the team. She's so excited to have Deja back. So excited to have Alyssa and Raina in front of her. And I know that all she talks about is going to the Women's College World Series again. Do I think she breaks it? Yes, I do, just because of the monsters that are around her, like I just said. And she's a good hitter. I mean, if she breaks it, she deserves it. She's a stud.
We're joined by Kinsey Fowler here live on In the Circle. Victor, what are we going to do this year? We've been doing this big campaign over the years when we've had Kinsey on, like big hashtag, get you to Eugene, right? Like what are some of the memorable moments, right?
It seems like a lifetime ago.
So, yes. Yeah, so of course we had the ever popular, the one that got on the map, get Kinsey to Oregon.
Yes,
that's the first one. And then our newest one before. Yes, it worked. Thankfully, the Pac-12 network representatives listen to us. We will take about 1% of
we're going to take very,
and then the newest one, which is still trying to push. I know what we can say. Now the newest one is that we're still trying to work on is get Kinsey back to OKC. So I know it's been a while since you've been there as a player. We would like to try to get you on in some capacity as a commentator, either working for the Pac-12 network or some way as a fan. So we're going to go back to what our original hashtag was before this season got truncated, was get Kinsey back to OKC. That is the official hashtag that we will bring back for 2021.
Well, if I get to go to OKC, then that is good news for the world. Because that means I can travel, I can leave my home.
Yeah, maybe we should just
game in person.
Yes,
that would be big. But we could also kind of extend that, for a while as well.
Okay,
we could extend that.
We may have to push it to 2022, but we'll hope. I like the optimism. Like, let's get me out of the house.
Amen to that. Two last things before we let you go. What do you think what's the most interesting team or storyline you're interested outside of the Pac-12 you're looking forward to seeing when the games get? Is it the SEC, Alabama there? You talked to Big 12, Texas without Miranda Ellis, who opted out, Oklahoma back healthy. I'm kind of curious if you have a storyline you're kind of intrigued as a fan and covers it.
I think the Big 12, I think, will be really fun and entertaining to watch it all shake down because it's very similar to the Pac-12. You have three teams who I think are capable of going to the Women's College World Series and taking home the conference. And they're all like so close, right? Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and Texas. I know that there's all that rivalry with those three teams. So I think that just adds another factor to it. I think Texas is still going to be so good, even without Ellis. I mean, I watched them last year and they took it to UCLA. Their hitters are solid. I don't care who's on the roster. I know Coach White is going to have their pitchers ready, so I'm not worried about that. So I think the Big 12 will be fun to watch.
I agree. I think it's going to be very exciting. We'll get into that later on, but we're going to let you go. You made history. You're a first guest in our live show, so appreciate that. We'll get you back on once we get before Pac-12 starts. And I know you're looking. You're bidding. I just want to see you broadcast again. That's what I miss. I hear you. Okay.
Me too. Let's cross our fingers.
Fingers crossed. Tell the audience where they can find you before we let you go.
I don't know, my home. They can find me at home. I'm just kidding. On Twitter at Kinsey Fowler 19 and Instagram.
There you go. By the way, we will congratulate. We'll talk more about this next time we have you on. You being on the all 2010s Arizona team. We'll talk about that next time.
Thank you. Yes.
Congrats.
10 years? That's crazy.
Yeah. I'll let you trash talk. The 2000s did a little trash talking. Just a spoiler alert.
2000s team would. I mean, all of them. The 90s team would. The 10s though. The 10s is pretty good. I'll take that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You're gonna, so
yeah,
that's your assignment. When next time we get you on before the Pac-12 starts, we'll talk about the 2010 team.
Okay. Sounds good. I can do that.
All right, buddy. Hey, stay safe and thanks for doing this.
Of course. Take care, guys.
Take it easy. Kenzie Fowler joining us here on In the Circle Live. How about that, boys? How about that? Live Kenzie Fowler on the show. Pretty darn good.
Stuff.
Hey, Vic, who we got next?
Well, coming up on our live season preview extravaganza, we're going to dive into the SEC. A lot of storylines to talk about in the SEC. And we got somebody who has some pretty good firsthand knowledge of the SEC. Of course, we're talking about our colleague, Gray Robertson from Out of the Box podcast and the coverage of Alabama softball on Praise 93.3. Him and his good buddy, Tom Canterbury, will be on the airways starting this weekend versus Colorado State. So we're looking forward to seeing them back in action. I'm sure they're ready to see 225 back in action. There he is right now, ladies and gentlemen, gracing our screen. You want to know Mr. Gray Robertson. Gray, welcome to our humble broadcast, sir.
Hey guys, it's good to see all y'all. I know that when I'm hearing from each of you at different times during the day and during the week that it must be softball season. So we're ready to go.
It's been a while, man. It
has.
been a while. Give me your thoughts here as you get set. You're right. Of course, you guys are right in the middle of it. Huge weekend in Austin, Texas, Alabama, Arizona, part of that field, Colorado State. And mentioned. I want to start with that because one of the bigger storylines in the sport is Miranda Ellis opting out of Texas, which adds an extra element to that tournament. Your thoughts?
Well, so I've started making the board for opening weekend, and the film has been watched. I've got reports on everybody, and I had for Texas, I was using some of the stats that I had ready for last year because if y'all remember, right before the season was canceled, we were getting ready for Alabama, Texas in Tuscaloosa. So as I was going through, I looked at Miranda Ellis's numbers, and I thought back to 2020 and just the tear that she was on. I mean, it could have been a truly historic year, both in the circle and at the plate. And it's impossible to not think that this impacts Texas in some way. I mean, Shaylin O'Leary's good. Is she ready to be an ace? I don't know. Molly Jacobson, I put together her numbers versus ranked opponents compared to other opponents, and there is a stark difference there. Last year, I know Ole Miss as a whole didn't get off to a great start, but against ranked opponents, Molly Jacobson had a 4.83 ERA in 2020 for the Rebels. So she wasn't on her game, as the team wasn't either. But I just don't know who I trust pitching-wise for Texas yet to take over the Ellis position. You knew you could trust Miranda Ellis. You know, she might not shut a team down. She didn't really pitch that well against Alabama in Supers in 2019, but she was going to limit people. She wasn't going to blow up in a game and teams were going to have 20 hits on her and put up 8 runs or something. I don't know if I see O'Leary and Jacobson being able to stop potent offenses like that right out of the gate because, I mean, Alabama and Arizona doesn't get much tougher to open the season.
No doubt. I mean, that's a tournament I'm looking forward to seeing as it plays itself out. Let's talk, obviously, the SEC. You and Tom did a cool thing at your podcast. You had every SEC head coach on your show for part of a SEC Media Days, kind of like what football does. I thought was great. Pretty cool that you guys were able to accomplish. So a salute on that. Based on that, and now as we're closer to the season, what is the biggest question that you have? It doesn't have to be Alabama. It could be anything in the SEC softball that you're curious going into the season.
Oh gosh, where do we start with that? Because I feel like after we would have those calls, Tom and I, whether we were doing it in the studio or over Zoom, we would have a decompressing session and say, okay, did this team answer those questions that we had going in? Because I would write down certain things going in and hoping that the coaches would give us answers, and sometimes they wouldn't. I would say that question that I still don't know if I have heard an answer to is with Missouri. I'm a big believer. I feel very self-conscious about it because every single poll has Missouri essentially 7th through 10th in the conference. I've got them way higher. But I asked Lopez and Anderson straight up, what is the pitching staff looking like? Are you planning to go pitch by committee again? Or is there someone that you think you believe in? And I got kind of a non-answer. It was we believe in everybody, yada, yada, yada. And very, very, it was what you would expect a coach to say in that situation, which to me said they don't have anyone they can rely on. So at least to be an ace. So to me, the biggest question is, does Missouri have somebody who can really emerge and make them a potential threat to be in the top three? Because I think we're all in agreement. Top three in the SEC looks pretty clear cut. Alabama, LSU, Florida. You can arrange those three any way that you want, but those look like the three best teams in the conference. Is there a team that can push them? I think Missouri can, and I think the odds of that increases a lot if they have an arm that they can truly trust to just go for a weekend and get 2 quality starts against SEC competition.
All right, so let's talk about the big three there you just described. Let's start with Alabama. You know them very well. They're healthy this year. Is that the big difference between this year and what we saw from Alabama in 2020?
I think for sure. There was a lot going on. You had the Abby Dorr situation where she was out the first weekend because she was still getting cleared. And then Bailey Hemphill gets hurt with a finger injury in Clearwater. Montana was completely off her mojo because of the whole Team USA pitching in the offseason thing. She was pitching for the U17 or U18, whichever team it was, and then trying out for Team USA. So her rhythm and what she usually does in the offseason was completely thrown off. And there was just something funky about the whole thing. Jenna Johnson was never healthy. Alyssa Brown out after week 1. Maddie Morgan was out for week 1 because of a team thing. And there just never was a rhythm. And now that rhythm is back. I remember talking to Montana right after the season ended, or at some point in the offseason, and she said what I did last offseason in terms of timing and how she got ready for the year, she was never going to do it again. She was going back to what worked. And Patrick Murphy said on our podcast, and he said in other places that we've heard interviews with him, that she's pitching like the best Montana he's ever seen. So I think that with all those pieces ready to go, I think that this team is primed to be what people expected them to be in 2020.
LSU, man, they got everybody back pitching-wise. They were number 1 in 2020 when the season ended at ERA. Deeper offense. You know, we had Beth Torina on recently. I think it's the most relaxed I've seen her. I think she really likes this team a lot. I think they're Oklahoma City threat, and who knows, you know, Alabama and LSU, they always decide things, it seems like, in various sports, as you know.
And maybe we're deciding things in the non-conference, because I'm sure you've noticed in the schedule, LSU is coming to Tuscaloosa for one game on a Sunday in February. And that's the only meeting in the regular season between these two. It won't count towards the standings. But, I mean, how fun is that going to be? LSU, here's the thing. We've talked about it a lot on the podcast when we discuss the Bayou Bengals. This is a team that every year looks like they can win the conference. But there's something that happens about midway through the SEC schedule, and they'll drop a series. In 19, it was the road series to Arkansas. They lost the first 2 games, and everyone's looking around saying, how did that happen? They go on these little mid-season swoons that have prevented them from actually winning the conference in the last couple of years. And I don't have the data in front of me, but to back it up, I went through, and I think every year in the last 5 years, they've had a worse record in the back half of conference play compared to the front half. So if they can find a way to avoid that and just be consistent all the way through, yeah, absolutely LSU can win the conference. But it's kind of one of those situations where I have to see it to believe it. I know the pitching staff is good. I'm a big Shelby Wickersham fan.
Yeah,
I think that she's the best one on the staff. I was shocked she wasn't getting more innings in 2019. But I think if the pitching staff does well and the offense can stay at a high clip, because, again, another issue in 2019, the offense slowly, as the season went on a decline, then absolutely this is an LSU team that can win the conference for sure.
I just had Tim Walton on this week, and he told us that Skylar Wallace right now is not eligible, and it's not optimistic about it. He knew it was kind of a small chance that she will probably be eligible this year. It looks like he's going to go with Reese, the freshman at shortstop. I know you talked to him about the situation at shortstop when you had him on. Hannah Adams is an option at shortstop, but as he told you and he told me, he loves her at second base. Your thoughts on that situation with Skylar moving to Florida, probably not eligible, what that means for the Gators?
Well, you know, it was so funny. In that interview, obviously we didn't know. We talked to Tim Walton about the Skylar Wallace situation. So we have this whole shortstop conversation. He gives us an answer. It doesn't look like that's going to play out because Skylar's going to Florida. And then as it turns out, she's not going to get this year. So it appears. And I think maybe that helps him a little bit. It sounded like when we talked to him, he already had a plan for this year, and then the Skylar Wallace thing kind of fell into his lap. So this isn't something completely out of the blue. I don't know. I mean, Florida, the biggest issue Florida had a couple years ago was that nobody behind Lindemann and Lorenz were getting hits, and nobody behind Barnhill was really doing much in the circle. Last year, we saw more production up and down the lineup. Hannah Adams, like you said, was great. Charlotte Eccles, I mean, goodness gracious. If you're a good player in the Big Ten and you come to Florida, things work out, apparently. And I think that gave them confidence, but at the same time, we didn't see Florida dominate good teams, if that makes sense. So we saw them lose to Michigan early on. We saw them, in the series against Louisiana. They beat Auburn, but Auburn was what Auburn was last year. I'm not sure that I saw enough for me to say that, the Florida problems of 2019 are gone in 2020. So I'm not a complete believer in the 2021 Gators. I think that replacing the defensive acumen of Reynoso is going to be more difficult than people realize. And if you want an example of that, look at Alabama with Claire Jenkins when she was out in 2020. And while Skylar Wallace stepped in there, that caused a ripple effect across the whole infield that it was tough to adjust for the first 3 weeks of the year. So I'm not totally sold on Florida, but I do think, as we talked about earlier, they're clearly one of the three best teams in the SEC. And, I mean, say what you want about Florida, they're always good. So they'll probably be hosting Supers.
Yeah, they always figure out a way, right? They always seem to figure out a way. And then there was that one player that you liked that you covered in the summer that you even asked him about that could play a role in helping him and kind of fill that Reynoso role at some point with some at-bats or even defensively.
Yeah, Sarah Longley, a big fan. She played short the entire year for Fast Pitch U at the FGCL this past summer. She was right there in the voting for Offensive Player of the Year. She's got pop. She's got it all. His answer didn't tell me that she is as close to starting as I thought maybe she was based on what I saw this summer. Perhaps that was just a product of the team that she was on because she did play on the team that finished in last place in the FGCL standings. But I think that she's a player that will emerge at some point in her Florida career because she's just got too much talent to be a bench player and a pinch hitter, situational player for Tim Walton throughout her career. She's going to make an impact at some point. Maybe this year, we'll see. There is that void now, so she'll have her chance at some point.
Let's go through some storylines the rest of the league. I want to start with Ole Miss because you spoke to Jamie Traxel. She takes over now the Ole Miss program. Your thoughts on her in Oxford and what we could expect in her first season?
So she was our last interview. She was a delight. Tom and I, we had a blast talking to all these coaches. They were all great. And I didn't really remember Jamie Traxel much from our conversations for TV before Alabama, Minnesota a couple years ago, but she really was great. She gave us a lot of good answers. It sounds like she's adjusting to Oxford well. I mean, this is an Ole Miss team that, it's a rebuild. This is going to take a couple years. It might have gone quicker if Molly Jacobson hadn't left, but now they're looking to see who in the pitching staff can fill that role and be the best arm on their team. I love Maddie Banks. That has been well advertised. She's a great person and a great player, transfer from Virginia Tech. She'll make an impact, but I mean, here's the problem. The conference is so good now that a rebuild is essentially 3 steps back. I mean, everyone is good. No one is getting worse. So when you are at best static, it's really tough to have much success at all. So I think Jamie Traxel will work out in Oxford. This year's going to be rough, but I expect to see the Rebels back in the NCAA tournament very soon.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I think they could be the one SEC team that possibly doesn't make the tournament this year. Auburn, they were having a tough time of it in 2020. Mm-hmm. Now, Emily Carasoni now is a full-time assistant there. Is there reason to be optimistic at Auburn from the standpoint of bouncing back, having to maybe getting back to the tournament? Because they looked like they were going to be a bubble team in 2020, the way it was headed. They were borderline 500 team. I've seen their schedule. They've scheduled a little softer non-conference. They're going to open with Alabama for conference play, which will be circled everywhere in the state of Alabama. But your thoughts on Auburn and Mickey Dean?
Yeah, I like Coach Dean. It was the first time I talked to him for media days. Cool guy. He clearly has a vision, and I think he clearly knows it's not going to be automatic. I think he would have hoped that it would have been faster. The success would have come a little bit quicker, but I think he recognized that there was more that had to be cleared out before he could actually put his footprint on the program. And I mean, I'm optimistic for Auburn. I think optimistic for Auburn is 10th or 11th, but I'm optimistic of what the year could look like because I think Samantha Yarbrough was about to really burst onto the scene in the SEC last year, and we all knew she was good, but the performance in Gainesville in the second game, the 1-0 decision that went to 10 innings or 9 innings or however long it was, she really stepped up on the road against an offense that was on fire in the conference. And we talked about it on our last show before everything shut down. I thought she was going to move to the Friday, Sunday starter. And if that happened, Auburn maybe is able to get back on track. Offensively, we'll see. You know, it's a lot of the same pieces, but I think Samantha Yarbrough is a pitcher that Mickey Dean can build a team around. And I think Auburn will be okay. I'm not saying they're going to, you know, they're going to be top half of the conference, but they'll pick off a couple games from some people. And it does help that the non-conference is pretty light. Really, the only games of note are the 2 against South Carolina.
Yeah, we're going to be playing in Jacksonville. That's going to be the weird year in 2020. We had LSU and Alabama non-conference, South Carolina and Auburn non-conference. It's going to be. I hope that board can check, can keep track of all that. Can your board check all that?
Maybe. Let's say the whiteout will be used often this year.
Very good. We're speaking with Gray Robertson here. We're previewing the SEC here on our live show of In the Circle. Tennessee. I know we both talked to the weeklies. They're pretty optimistic. They're healthy. Rogers back healthy in the pitching staff to go alongside Callie Turner. You got Shipman healthy. She was hurt. They got a new pitching coach, Megan Rhodes Smith, who I like a lot, former player, former pitcher there. Your thoughts on the Vols? Ralph told me when he was on the podcast, he made a point to bring up the fact that the last time there was a full season and they were healthy, they finished second in the SEC. So there's clearly a chip on the shoulder at Tennessee there. Are you buying?
More than I was last year. It was well documented in our group texts and over social media that I was a quote-unquote Tennessee hater. I did not hate Tennessee, but I did have them 8th in the standings because I didn't buy what the team would be behind Ashley Rogers. And then, of course, Ashley Rogers gets hurt, and my point is backed up. So I do enjoy being right sometimes. But I'm buying in more this year for sure. Ashley Rogers, obviously, coming back is huge. Callie Turner now has the experience to be a quality number 2. She just wasn't ready to be an ace last year. And I think there is that disrespect factor because I asked the weeklies the same question. I asked it directly to Ralph. And I said, look, do you view this year as essentially a do-over from what was a pretty disappointing 2020? And it was disappointing. I mean, you could throw catastrophic out there and you might have a point. But he immediately said, well, 2019, we were right there in the SEC. We were right there in the NCAA tournament, and we've got a lot of those people back. And I think it's a fair point. Again, I'll have to see it to believe it, but I think that there's reason to think that Tennessee will be back up closer to where they should be in the SEC.
I think one program that we kind of need to talk about a little bit is Mississippi State with what they did with Samantha Ricketts in her first year in that program and what they did going with 22-3 before the season got shut down. Are you a believer in what Mississippi State did last year? It could have carried over into 2021.
No, not. Let me rephrase. I am not a believer that last year dictates anything about this year. Mississippi State didn't play anybody, and the teams that they did play, they lost. So I don't think that we can look at the 21-3 record and say that means Mississippi State's ready to be 5th or higher in the SEC. Now, that being said, there is no more terrifying duo in the SEC than Mia Davidson and Fale Lua. And I think it was interesting to watch how Emily Williams really got the wildness under control. If you remember when Mississippi State played at Alabama in 2019, she finished with, 11 walks and 13 strikeouts in the game that we played against Mississippi State. That was way toned down. in 2020 in terms of just the walk numbers and what that looked like. And I credit Samantha Ricketts for that and what that coaching staff was able to do. And Annie Willis got off to a great start too. I don't know if she can be someone that shuts down SEC offenses on a regular basis, but I think the improvement's there. And I think you're going to see that from Mississippi State this year. Are they ready to win the conference? Are they ready to challenge that big three? No, I would be very surprised, but I think that they're ready to make a step up and challenge maybe to host regionals.
Do they have the player of the year on their roster? Who would you pick right now? If you had to be bold, pick player of the year in the SEC. I feel it's a wide open race.
It really is. Gosh, I don't know. It could be Fa. It could be Mia. I typically look at the players that scare me, who terrifies me when they step into the box. So Kendall Lindemann is right there. Bailey Hemphill. The disrespect from multiple bodies will, I think, factor into her success. And I was calculating opening weekend career stats. I think she's going to be more on par with what she's done throughout her Alabama playing career next weekend when the season starts. I don't know if I can pick one, but I would be surprised if your player of the year is not someone amongst Hemphill, Leilua, Davidson. I'll throw Eccles in there and Lindemann.
Give me your South Carolina. Has had some injury issues. They're preseason top 25 for Beverly Smith. Georgia. Give me your thoughts on those two teams, what you expect from them.
I am so earlier when I referenced being a Tennessee hater, I guess this year I'm a Georgia hater. I am anti. I've got them. I've done multiple attempts at breaking down the schedules and predicting records, and every time I do it, I'm not going to give away the number because we're doing that on the premiere, but Georgia is very low, very low. And I think it's because this conference schedule is a lot tougher than people think. All right, so look at the road schedule. At Ole Miss, probably going to win that. I would favor Georgia there. But then at Kentucky, at Tennessee, at Mississippi State. I mean, are we sure they're going to win any of those? And then the home series, Missouri, Florida, Arkansas, Alabama. Are we sure that they're favored against all of those? Maybe Missouri, because that's early on, and maybe Missouri hadn't figured out their pitching situation. I think this is a Georgia team that's just going to be up against it schedule-wise. And I think South Carolina is in a better situation because they'll have a lot of the players that were hurt back. I think that losing Johns hurts, but I don't think it is as impactful as maybe I thought it was before I talked to Bev Smith. So I'm back more on the South Carolina bandwagon than I was about 2 months ago. But Georgia, I think it's gonna be an uphill climb all year long just because of how tough that conference slate is.
Well, and there's always that one SEC team that maybe is better than the record's going to end up showing because they get the tough, luck of the draw, right? From a scheduling standpoint, there's always that one team that gets hit with like tough road series. They have an injury, and then they're like, next thing you know, they're like, whoa, I can't believe that team is 12th in the SEC, right? I mean,
right.
So you feel that Georgia's could be that team this year?
Yeah, and I love Georgia. I have said many times, I'm a Mary Wilson Avant truther. I think she's one of the top 5 pitchers in the conference. But losing Sierra Bryan, losing Justice Mills, and then you factor in the schedule, and also don't forget Oklahoma is coming to Athens. So I don't know. I'm not a big believer in Georgia this year, and I like Coach Harris-Champer, and I think they're going to be good, but I don't think that the schedule sets up for them to be highly ranked in the SEC standings or in a position to host.
Speaking of losses, Kentucky, probably the big losers as far as the seniors not coming back, right? I mean, obviously you mentioned Sophia Reynoso is a big loss for Florida. Tim Walton talked about that that's a tough one that they're still getting over. But Kentucky really got hurt a little bit by some of their seniors not coming back, kind of a bad draw for them. What's your thoughts with Rachel Lawson?
I like Rachel Lawson. After the Media Days interviews, we did our little way too early preseason top 5s. I had Kentucky in there. I think that was a mistake. They're going to have to take a step back. I'm sorry. It's impossible not to. You lose your 2 best averages, your best power bat for sure on the roster, and you don't think anything's going to change. They're going to fall just a bit. I'm not buying in to all the people, and that includes, I think, the coaches who have Kentucky in the top 5 of the conference. And a part of that is because we're still waiting on Autumn Humes and Grace Ballman to take that step forward. I think that was the qualification I said going into 2020, and it didn't really happen. So I have to see it again. I have to see it from Kentucky. We've called them the Enigmas for years, and I think they're going to be that again in 2021. I think there's just too much to replace to really challenge to win the conference.
Yeah, and the bats you mentioned, losing, Martins and company. I mean, that's a tough blow there to kind of expect production to be replaced that quickly. I mean, that's in this league especially. Arkansas. You and spoiler here. You have Amanda Scarborough on your debut show here this week.
Yes,
right?
we do. Yeah, that was something that we thought would be fun because she was our last guest before everything shut down. So
Very
we're bringing
good.
it back.
Well, great minds think alike because she's going to be our guest on Monday's In the Circle podcast, and she's pretty popular. I've heard. Justin's the only person actually that has not interviewed her yet this offseason. But I will give away this spoiler because she probably will tell you the same thing. She likes Arkansas as a sleeper in the SEC. A lot of people like Arkansas as a sleeper. Are you in that bandwagon?
Yes. We'll see what the definition of sleeper is. I think that there's a strong chance Arkansas is back to hosting if they can find the offense to back up the pitching staff when they go crazy. Because when Autumn Storms has pitched really well, there have been times the last couple of years where the offense just wasn't totally there. I mean, she pitched one of the best games I've ever seen from her, and Arkansas was only able to put up one run against Alabama in the 7th. The offense has not always backed up the pitching staff in Fayetteville, and I think that that's starting to change. You've got Burnside there, Danielle Gibson. McEwen is, of course, fantastic. And I also think Arkansas's got the depth. Mary Haff is finally healthy. That was something Coach Deifel talked about in Media Day. She said that Mary's been able to actually take some time to really rehab from the ACL injury that hampered her in 2019 before that NCAA tournament. And they've got another young pitcher coming in, and they've got Jenna Bloom, who's very raw but has a lot of talent. So I think Arkansas can be that team in the weeds. How good they really are depends on what Autumn Storms looks like the second time she faces teams, because that's been the bugaboo pretty much her whole career. But I can see a world where Arkansas is top 5 in the conference. I've got them pretty close to that, and I think that they'll be in a position to host regionals again.
Couple last things before we let you go. We had Kinsey Fowler on before you, and she mentioned Washington, Arizona, UCLA. Obviously, they're national title contenders representing the Pac-12. In your opinion, who are the SEC teams that you think are legit national championship contenders?
I think those top 3, Alabama, LSU, Florida. I think it's pretty cut and dry there. I think otherwise you've got good regional hosts. You've got teams that can make runs to Oklahoma City. But as we've alluded to many times in the last couple months, you could put Missouri at 4, you could put Missouri at 10, you could put Arkansas at 9, you could put Arkansas at 5. All those teams are interchangeable. And when it's that volatile, I just don't trust them to make runs to the Women's College World Series, because that means, while, yes, maybe you can make it to OKC, you could also lose that game to Boise State the second day of a regional. So I don't trust any of those teams as much as I trust Alabama, LSU, and Florida. I think they are definitely the national championship contenders. I would say right now that I think 2 SEC teams will be in OKC, and they're all going to hope that they don't play UCLA.
Yeah, that would be a theme, I think, for UCLA this year, people playing UCLA. Jason Billings, by the way, has chimed in. He agrees with you about Wickersham and LSU. I'm curious, though, and some questions here. Who would you pick as the best pitcher in the SEC right now?
Right now? Oh, gosh, I don't want my bias to show through, but I think when she's pitching at her best, it's Montana Fouts. I would say right behind that is Ashley Rogers when she's pitching at her best. Unfortunately, we haven't really seen that since 2019. So after that, I'm a big Mary Wilson Avant believer. I'm not sure she would be right there. I think Trilachek showed good stuff, but how does she look facing the rigors of an SEC schedule? The LSU staff is good. But I think right now, if you ask me, gun to my head, to pick an SEC pitcher to start a staff with right now, I would take Fouts.
I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm a Fouts fan, and healthy especially is huge. Folks, that's Gray Robertson, ladies and gentlemen. Tell the audience, all right, big show, season debut here, season's here finally. Tell us about the show and tell us where they can find you.
Yeah, Out of the Box, back for season 3. We are back for more fun and farcical nature of comments on Facebook and Twitter that because it's already started. We've already got a list that we can say in the premiere of things for the Off the Wall segment. But yeah, Tom Canterbury and I will be back for the Out of the Box podcast season 3 premiere at @OutofTheBox_pod. We've got Scarborough coming back. It will be a very different conversation from the one that we had back in March of 2020. Emily Pitek will be back on, as she has been for the last 2 years, for Pitek's point of view. And we're going to give our preseason standings. We'll give landmines and gold mines, which are our big, bold predictions before the season begins. And we're going to break down all these teams and really get in depth with Alabama, because as you'll hear in the Emily Pitek interview, which we did earlier today, this is a team and a schedule that's very similar to 2020. Now, how does the team respond to that challenge? We'll see. I think it'll be a lot better than what we saw last year. And I think also Tom and I are just really excited to get the season going. We are still hopeful that we will be in Austin for week 1. We'll see. Maybe by the time we record on Monday, we'll have an answer for that. But we're just excited to actually have a softball season to talk about and to be back on the air together.
Here. That's the big thing. And when is the episode dropping?
We'll record Monday. It will drop for those night owls about midnight on Monday night, and then we'll do the social media full court press Tuesday morning.
That's me. I like the late night owl. I need something to go there, but all right, bud. Hey, send my best to Tom. Excited for you guys. Doing a great job there, man. We're proud of you. We'll get you back on here, obviously, during the season, and especially this year. You guys get to host the SEC tournament.
That's right. We're doing the whole podcast-a-palooza, assuming that everyone can come by May, which knock on wood, hopefully that can happen by then. And we're excited.
You're Victor now. Victor's definitely he's got his fingers crossed right now.
It'll
be great. Thanks so much for having me.
All of it.
All right, great. Take it easy, bud. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
No problem. Gray Robertson joining us. You're on the In the Circle live show, talking a little SEC there, boys. All right, Justin McLeod with us, of course, at Vic there. Justin, your thoughts there, what you've heard in the first hour there. We break down the Pac-12 and the SEC. What jumped out to you?
Well, I'm obviously at least the 4th, 5th best analyst on this podcast tonight. I mean, that much is pretty clear. I like what Kinsey said about the strength of the top third of the Pac-12. I think she's right about that. And Gray broke down the SEC really impressively. There's a lot of those teams that have strengths and potential strengths, and which of those will be evident this year. It's going to take actual game action for us to find out. There's a lot of questions around the SEC. I think not necessarily in the is this team going to be good sense, but okay, how is this going to go? Are they going to be good in this sense kind of thing? And a lot of those questions, he pointed them out right there. I think there's a lot of teams that first few weeks of the season will get some answers one way or the other on things.
Feel free, everybody. If you're tuning in, you could send questions on the chat. Jason Billings has done that. We'll read you some questions throughout here. As we're going to go kind of speed dial to the other leagues as we get you set for 2021 season. And, Justin, maybe the league that has the most questions at this hour as we do this show, guys, is the Big Ten. We still have no schedule from the Big Ten. We have no details of what they're going to do. The only thing I can tell you is sources have told In the Circle the Big Ten will have a conference-only schedule. That's been well known for a while. It looks like Carol Hutchins has said this on multiple outlets, 44-game schedule, conference only. Sources have told In the Circle that will start February 26th in Florida. Victor, are you hosting the Big Ten?
Not that I am aware of. If I am, I need to make sure I get my house in proper order.
Please do. Who knows where they're showing up, but Big Ten 44. This is to me very fascinating, guys. It's weird. The Big Ten starting in Florida, conference only, the only major conference not to play non-conference games. Is that something that could haunt the Big Ten come Selection Sunday night? I think it will. Do you think, starting with you, Victor, and then you, Justin. Victor, do you think that's going to haunt the Big Ten?
I think it will, Eric. And you think you understand the fact that you're playing just a conference-only schedule. How can you truly evaluate if you're one of the 64 best teams in America when the only teams that you're playing are those within your league? So you may have an RPI where you say you're in the 40s or the 50s, and you're on the bubble come selection Sunday night, but your quality win could be a team that's in the bottom third of the Big Ten. Meanwhile, somebody you're competing for a spot in the tournament with may have that non-conference win against a Power 5 school, maybe from the SEC or a Pac-12 school, that can put them over the hump, especially if it comes to seeding and where you can bust a certain team. So the Big Ten having a conference-only schedule, I feel could hurt their ability to get more than 5 or 6 teams in the field of 64.
Well, I think they'll take 5 or 6 at this point. I don't think they're getting that anywhere close to that. Do you, Justin? What's your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I think it hurts the Big Ten. The thing about the Big Ten is there's always some topsy-turviness in that league. Michigan always is the constant, Minnesota the last few years. Outside of that, you've got a group of teams that sometimes some years they can be highs and some years they have really low lows, and it could be one year after the other. But the one saving grace for the Big Ten is that some of those teams can go into tournaments like the Mary Nutter and Clearwater and all that and pull off some wins against teams that are proven commodities. Well, you don't have that going for you this year if you're the Big Ten. You the best you can do is you can beat Michigan or Minnesota, and if too many do that, well, then it dilutes the greatness of Michigan and Minnesota. So I think it only hurts the Big Ten in all honesty because, I don't see a lot of advantages to that from a softball standpoint. Obviously, you've got the health stuff, but from strictly a softball standpoint, I think it's got to hurt the Big Ten. I don't really see a whole lot of benefit just from on the field perspective.
No doubt about it. Give me your thoughts now, Justin, on the Big Ten as a whole. Michigan obviously brings back the Bobian and Starocco, the pitchers. You got Minnesota, Amber, Pfizer. Give me your overall landscape thoughts on the Big Ten.
Well, I think Michigan and Minnesota are still the top two, and until proven otherwise. They've kind of jockeyed the last couple of years. Pfizer, was kind of had a little bit of a down year starting last year in 2020. Her numbers weren't the level we were used to seeing from Amber Pfizer. So I'm curious to see how she's going to come out. She's got a year of rest now, the extra, super senior year ready to go now. I think you could see her come back rejuvenated, and if she does, Minnesota's all the better for it. Of course, you got a coaching change to work with there too, but she was able to keep Piper Ritter as her pitching coach. Obviously, he's paid dividends for in her career so far. Outside of that, you've got Northwestern, who's still got Danielle Williams. You've got Jordan Rudd, Rachel Lewis, Kenna Wilkie, some real talent on that roster, and I think they stick around. Last year they also kind of had a little bit of a topsy-turviness. I think Northwestern sticks around that upper echelon this year. And then after that, I think you've got a level that probably goes from 4 all the way into the 8-9 territory in the Big Ten standings of teams that could go one of many ways. Iowa's one I really like. I like their pitching staff. Wisconsin lost a ton of seniors, including their best hitter and their best pitcher, which is kind of a, lose-lose situation if you're Wisconsin. So there's a lot of teams that I think have the potential, have really high ceilings, but also there's some that equally have low floors. So after those top 3, similar, honestly, to what we've talked about with other conferences tonight, I think you've got several teams that kind of, the way, depending on how conference play goes, could be jockeying for position anywhere from, like I say, 4 to 8 or 9 in the standings.
And that could be pivotal depending on what you want to be as high as you can to make sure you get squeak into the tournament. It could be that much. You have to get 3rd, 4th place on there. Do you have a sleeper in the Big Ten? Is Iowa your sleeper?
Yeah, I like Allison Ducey. I like Lauren Shaw and Nia Carter on offense. Iowa probably is my sleeper, honestly. I think if the cards get played right in Big Ten, I think they have a chance of making the tournament this year. That's probably the cap for me for Big Ten teams, but I think they could be the 4th.
See, Victor, look at that. You were thinking Iowa gets pumped up on the show, and it was had nothing to do with me.
Hey, we have a certain friend of the podcast that used to be in these parts of the Sunshine State that now coaches in Iowa. I think the team that I feel may be a surprise in the Big Ten is Indiana. But the thing with Indiana, and I think Jessica kind of mentioned this earlier, it's so topsy-turvy because 2019, Sean Staten really put that 2018, Indiana really came on the map. They were one of the last 4-6 teams out. 2019, they fell back a little bit. It looked like they got things rolling a little bit 2020 before the season got shut down. what is the true Indiana team? Is it the one that we saw in 2018, or is it the one that we saw in 2019 and parts of the 2020 season? If they can get consistent, particularly pitching wise, because we know Shannon Staten's offense, she's going to run, she's going to put pressure on the defense. Can she get that pitching that she has been known to get at her previous stop at Marshall? If she can get that, I think Indiana can challenge with Iowa to be that final team to get into the tournament from the Big Ten.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Jason Billings asking, what do we know about Wisconsin? They took one from Oklahoma in 2019, I believe. Speaking about, I think that regional. It's a different Wisconsin team here, right? It's a different Wisconsin team, guys. Big questions up there in Madison for Coach Healy, Justin.
Yeah, and, Wisconsin was one of the first teams to say, we're not going to bring our senior class back. And they had a big senior class to lose. You had Caitlin Menz, who was the pitching ace, and you had Kayla Conwin, who'd kind of struggled with some injuries during her career, but really once she got back on the dirt was stellar. You're talking a Big Ten Player of the Year there. I think it was 2019. So to lose two players like that all at once, which you knew they were going to graduate, so you knew they were going to go, but to lose them at a time when Minnesota's able to bring back Amber Pfizer, for instance. You would think Wisconsin and Minnesota, they're both going to lose their aces at the same time, both kind of have to be in that position. Well, now Wisconsin is, Minnesota's not. So I have a lot of questions actually about Wisconsin. Haley Hestecken, and I'm probably saying her name wrong, full disclosure. I think she can step into the ace role, but I'm not sure she can step into it at the same level Men's was. So I think there's some role players there, and I really have a lot of questions about the Wisconsin offense. Role players there, but I'm just not – it's a very different Wisconsin team than the one that did beat Oklahoma. It's a very different Wisconsin team.
It's honestly, there's going to be a lot of questions about Big Ten teams, and we're probably going to have them all year round because they're playing each other, and we can't. It's going to be hard to evaluate them against other teams like Big 12 teams, for example, and that's where I want to kind of move to the Big 12. We'll make our picks here at the end, but I want to talk Big 12. A lot of great excitement over the Big 12. You got Oklahoma healthy, G. Juarez, Texas, the big story here recently in the offseason. Miranda Ellish opting out of the year. Oklahoma State, Kenny Gajewski building their nucleus. Baylor's healthy with Glenn Moore, with Rodoni back as pitcher. Your thoughts, Justin, starting with you on the Big 12.
Well, I think something Kinsey Fowler said earlier. I think it's going to be a really fun conference. I don't think Texas is out of the race by any means without Miranda Ellish. Oklahoma's Oklahoma, always will be until somebody dethrones them. And Oklahoma State got some good talent there. So it kind of seems like a theme this year. It's already come up several times here. I think you've got a top three teams there, and I think you've got some more that are going to perform well. Probably going to be tournament teams, going to pull some games from teams that on paper maybe they shouldn't. Texas Tech and Baylor are two in that category for me. I think the Big 12 is one of the more fun conferences this year because I could see a lot of different scenarios happening on a lot of different sides of the ball, pitching, offense, etc. I just think it's a really fun conference.
Very fun league there. And Victor, I know your interesting storyline. We're both following Victor is Sammy Ward, the new head coach at Texas Tech, a group that we got to see in Clearwater. Aaron Edmondson, we've seen up close in person. I'm really interested to see how they look there with Sammy Ward and if they can build on what they had been building prior. But Edmondson is certainly the one I'm in her senior year. Very fascinating to see how they met. They're kind of that team nobody's going to be talking about. Then Iowa State, Jamie Pinkerton, shout out, Kansas City Chiefs fan. He's probably right now getting ready for the Super Bowl on Sunday. But he's got maybe the best player nobody knows about it, Sammy Williams there. Infielder, yeah. She's back. And then Kansas with McFalls, they were starting to get some wins before the season. The Big 12 is clearly the number 3 league in the sport and kind of trying to push themselves into that line with the SEC and the Pac-12, right, Victor?
I really think, and you really look at it, Eric, of course, Texas, Oklahoma State, they are who they are. But it's been that middle of the conference that we've always had questions about for the last 3 or 4 years. You had Texas Tech, who, let's remember, they forced a if necessary game a couple of years ago in Baton Rouge versus LSU and played the Bayou Bengals pitch for pitch until the very, very end. So, and they have a bulk of that team back. How does Coach Ward put her stamp on that program for this 2021 season? You mentioned Sammy Williams in Iowa State. They were a postseason team a couple of years ago with the NISC, and I think they have the makings if Williams can perform as a preseason All-American that she's been selected in several outlets. If she can perform that level and get some pitching to go along with it, Iowa State, they can make some noise and be a recipient of one of those bids launched by the Big Ten. Baylor, again, Moore, Rendoni, if they can stay healthy, they have the makings of a team that can get into regionals, and depending on where that matchup is, can shock somebody and get to Super. So remember, the last time Baylor made it to the Women's College World Series, all they do is go to Hillenbrand and knocked off the 2-seed Arizona. So they have the capability of doing that before, and Kansas is on the up and up. This could be a season, if you have 2 postseason tournaments, where everybody in the Big 12 could make postseason play.
All right, let's do this real quick. Let's do picks for the leagues we've discussed, starting with the Big 12. Who do you guys have winning the Big 12? I've gone with Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma is healthy. We had Patty Gasso on the show on In the Circle. She says it's the best the offense has looked ever in the fall. That's scary thoughts. G. Juarez is healthy. I think they're now my pick, especially with Miranda Ellis opting out. I'm flipping there. And in fact, I think Oklahoma State could be the number 2 team there. Certainly it's going to be tight. I'm not saying there's a gap there. I think it's tight. I think you can make a case for that, but I'm going Oklahoma. Victor, who are you going with?
I'm going to go still with Texas slightly. I feel confident that their offense will make up for the loss of Ellis in the circle, but it's all going to be predicated on how that pitching staff can kind of be a staff and make up for the loss of Ellis. If they could do that, I still feel Texas slightly is the best team in the Big 12 over Oklahoma. But honestly, you can ask me this question on Monday's episode, and I could say Oklahoma.
Justin?
Oklahoma. I think it's got to be Oklahoma until they're dethroned, so to speak. I think it's a tighter top 3, but I think Oklahoma's on top until somebody topples them over.
Big Ten. I got Michigan. They were the champs. They got the 1-2 punch and offense, and I'm just going to go with Hutch and Michigan until proven otherwise. What do you guys have, starting with you, Justin?
I have questions about the offense, but it's the same thing principle I said with Oklahoma. I think until they're permanently toppled over, even with the Pfizer factor at Minnesota, I think it's got to be Michigan.
Vic?
I slightly am going to go with Michigan over Minnesota, just for the exact reasons that you gentlemen mentioned.
All right, SEC Pac-12. We had our guests, Kenzie Fowler and Gray Robertson, kind of break it down. I'm curious, who do you both have? I'm going UCLA Pac-12. I know it's real bold.
Wow,
I think
way to go on a limb there, Lopez.
Bold. But it's tight, and I agree with Kenzie. I think there's 3 national title teams there, and I think Oregon could be a super regional team there. And then I think SEC, I'm going Bama. I think the health is back. I agree with Gray that Fouts is the best pitcher individual, although I love LSU staff. And I think that's 2 teams there that I like a lot. In Florida, obviously, you can never count them out. Florida's a team that people try to, kind of like the Spurs and they try to kind of knock them out, and then they're always there, right? So I think that's a fun race. But I'm going to lean towards Alabama. It seems like it's Alabama's year. They won the national title in football. They're leading in basketball right now. So I feel like it's their year. Who knows? Vic, who you got in those leagues?
For a little fun stat, in the 6 seasons that Nick Saban and Alabama football have won the national championship, 5 of those preceding softball seasons, they have made it to Oklahoma City. I'm just saying, gentlemen. So when Alabama football usually wins, that means Coach Murphy and company are usually going to OKC that following season. I agree with you. I like LSU's staff. But the best pitcher in the SEC resides in Tuscaloosa, and I think Montana Faust is going to show you why that she is one of the elite pitchers in all college softball. I like Alabama to win the league. Watch out for a very good year for Mississippi State and Samantha Ricker. She has something special going down to Starkville with those two heavy hitters.
I'm actually going to pivot. Pac-12, I'm sticking with you. I think UCLA. But in the SEC, I'm actually going with LSU. I really like the pitching staff at LSU, and I think some of their offensive pieces, you put it together, I think it could support a really nice lineup. So I'm actually going out on a little bit of a limb, a little different from you guys, but I'm going to go LSU, Alabama, tight 2, and I mean UCLA in the Pac-12. I know you're all shocked by that too.
Yeah, bold there. All right, let's go into the ACC. Florida State, the favorites going in. You got Virginia Tech, Pete DeMoore, though a lot of people like Virginia Tech, and many believe, Justin, right, that Virginia Tech maybe has the best pitcher in the ACC.
Yeah, I mean, you got Keely Rochard, and she's put up crazy numbers. There for a minute she and Carrie Eberle were a pair, and now it's Rochard by herself as the ace, and she's done quite well, and I think she'll continue to do quite well. She's got the modern day equivalent of a rubber arm, and so if she can hold up, she's going to be a really incredibly valuable asset, and for Virginia Tech. There's some depth questions behind her, which I think is probably Virginia Tech's biggest questions, because their offense is really solid, to my estimation. But Richard's the kind of ace that even in modern day softball you want to have, because she can eat innings. She threw entire weekend series last year, which you really don't see very often anymore.
I think the biggest thing for me, guys, is the biggest thing for me is I think is going to be the gap closing between Florida State and everyone else in the ACC. You see what Holly April has done with Louisville, their program in the last few years, Marissa Young, what she has going with Duke, and Clemson with Coach Ribman, their first year. Some people felt if they continue to play out, they could be in a contention to maybe make the NCAA tournament. But at the end of the day, I still feel it's Florida State's league to lose. You can presume they'll have Caitlin Arnold back healthy for 2021. Sydney Sherrill, who suffered that very scary injury at the SBC Elite Invitational that opening weekend.
Well, that was on.
They'll get her back in 20.
That was on a Shellnut, actually. Yeah. That was the one injury.
Oh, Shellnut, thank you. My apologies. So on a Shellnut, you'll have her back.
Sydney Sherrill's healthy, everybody. She's healthy. Don't relax.
Yeah, Sydney Sherrill's fine. My apologies. It's been a very long day getting everybody set up. But the gap of the league is closing, but it's still Florida State's league to lose. So I like Florida State to take care of business in the ACC.
Watson might be the wild card in that one, Justin. She's the transfer from Louisville. What is Lonnie getting in Watson there? Can that be a 1-2 punch with Arnold, kind of like King and Hansen were when they won the national title? Probably a lot to ask there, but still, that's always been Florida State's recipe, is have 1-2 punch.
I think she is a definite X factor there. Coming from an interconference transfer, I think it's an even bigger deal because she's familiar. It's not somebody coming from the West Coast and coming to FSU and facing the ACC for the first time. Coming from Louisville, from interconference transfer, I think that's a big deal because Florida State has made a habit since Lonnie Alameda got there of exactly like you say, a 2-pitcher punch, sometimes bringing in a transfer if that's what it takes. So I think that's a real X factor, and I think Florida State's a lot better for having Watson there and eligible and able to play because pitching depth is at a premium in today's game of softball. I mean, we've talked about it so many different teams already, and Watson's a quality proven number 2, and behind Arnold, I think I think it could. I'm not saying it will, but I think it could get to the level of a Burroughs, Waldrop, King, Hansen kind of tandem, and in terms of what they can do for Florida State and their success.
The ACC is fascinating. I think it's deeper and deeper every year. I think it could have been a 5-6 bid league in 2020. Could be again this year. I think we feel pretty good about Virginia Tech and Florida State. Duke, the big question there is, can they kind of continue what they were building with Marissa Young there in 2020, where they look like could be a hosting factor there? You also have teams like Notre Dame. They're always in the mix with Holloway as the ace for Notre Dame. Brittany Pickett, healthy, according to Donna Papa, the healthiest she's been in a while. That makes North Carolina a threat, because the last time Pickett was healthy, they were winning a win of the Super Regionals. They almost won the Knoxville Regional. I think those are the teams you could say are strong. And then you got Clemson, John Rittman in his second year. What do they expect from an NC State? Victor, you've been on the NC State wagon here for a couple years. They finally get Trahan here eligible this year. Could that be the difference for NC State maybe being that 5th or 6th team to make the NCAA tournament this year?
Well, anytime you have somebody who's won pitcher of the year in 2 different leagues, it's always going to be a benefit to your pitching staff. And you have someone in Trahan who knows what it's like to pitch for Coach Patrick Swift. She did so at St. Francis, won pitcher of the year. She transferred to Southern Miss. Her 1 year there, she was pitcher of the year against CUSA. Now comes to NC State, kind of making it full circle with her and Coach Patrick Swift. If they can get that offense humming and get a number 2 behind Trahan, NC State could definitely be in the mix. And here's another transfer to keep in mind. And Justin, I'm sure you'll know this name. We'll talk about Jennifer Leonhardt transferring into Louisville. She was a part of the Southern Indiana team who won the national championship in Division II. If she can pitch the way she pitched at Southern Indiana, granted it's tougher competition, I think Louisville could be right in the mix with Florida, contending with Florida State, Notre Dame, and the rest of the ACC.
Wow. That's pretty big. What's your thoughts there?
Actually,
that's
kind of
big
funny.
there, Justin, right?
3 of my big X factors.
3 of the big factors. Okay.
Well, and what's funny, and sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you there, but you said Brittany Pickett, you said Abby Trahan, you said Jennifer Leonhardt, and those are 3 of my X factors for the ACC because of just the value they bring individually, but also just.
Oh, did we just lose Justin there, Vic?
No, feels like he had to take a little coughing break, so he'll be.
That was a very dramatic. That was a dramatic moment right there. Like breaking it down. Was going to agree with you.
Like, But I think to kind of, I think to kind of elaborate what Justin was talking about with Pickett, with Trahan, and also with Leonhardt, what they do individually for pitching staffs, and then collectively for not only those pitching staffs, but for their teams as well. Those are the biggest things with him. And of course, we see Pickett up close and in person, Eric, when they played in Florida a couple of years ago at NC with North Carolina. And you mentioned them being 1 win away from winning the Knoxville Regional. I believe it was 2018. I believe that was the year where they almost won in Knoxville in that regional force the if necessary game. So if you can get them to pitch the way they are capable of, the ACC could be 5, 6, possibly 7 if things break their way.
All right, we got Justin back there. Justin, I think you angered an ACC coach or something. I don't know. They try to knock you out there, but finish your thought there.
Well, yeah, that's what happens when you live in the country and have country internet, unfortunately. No, the thing about Brittany Pickett, Abby Trahan, and Jennifer Leonhardt is I put them all in the same category in terms of the value they bring to their individual teams. But all 3 are different situations. Pickett was hurt last year. Trahan had the red shirt. She's on her 3rd school. And Leonhardt coming up from Division II. So all individual and unique storylines. But you mentioned Leonhardt there, Vic. I'm glad you did because she was so good at Southern Indiana. So good. Led them to a national championship. And I think I saw Louisville last year. Saw them down in the opening weekend in Clearwater, the NFCA tournament. And one thing Louisville was lacking was just some consistency, offensively, but really in the circle. They just needed somebody who would come in as a shutdown arm and sometimes stop the bleeding, sometimes stop the bleeding before it got started. I think Leonhardt's that arm. And, the thing, and like I say, Pickett, Trahan, Leonhardt, I throw them all in that same category in terms of the immense value they bring to their individual teams, all to a similar level. But Leonhardt's one I really like because she was so good at Division II, in Division II at Southern Indiana. And now she's, up at Division I, she's playing in front of whatever kind of fans Louisville can bring in, but in front of her family, her home crowd. She's from Louisville. And I think she brings immense value to that Louisville club. They've got some pieces. We saw them in the regional against Northwestern and almost upsetting a couple of years ago. They've got some pieces, and if they can put those pieces together, I do think Louisville could join the upper echelon of the ACC. I think there's that chance is there.
Comments here in our chats here from our audience. Again, people, you can still come in with your comments and questions on our Twitter page in the Circle SB or here in our chat room at our YouTube page. Brittany is a pitcher I would not want my team to face. I think she's the best pitcher in the ACC. Talk about Pickett there. That's bold. That's bold. You guys buying that? Pickett? Would you take Pickett right now if you could take one pitcher in the ACC?
Ooh.
We have stumped the experts here. They're thinking.
I can make an argument for it.
Yeah, I mean, they could be in that mix there. I mean, she's been right there. They've been challenging Florida State. She's a two-way player, obviously, but she's a big game. She's won some big games for them. Wow. The boys are stumped here. Nice job, Jason.
Well,
you stumped the experts here.
Nice job. Now, I will say this. Don't be surprised if we're seeing towards the end of the season Clemson near that top 4, top 5. Victoria Cagle balled out last season, and if she has another good year like that, do not be surprised if she is being mentioned as a possible ACC Player of the Year candidate. She's a two-way pitch. She's a two-way player, just like Pickett. She can pitch, she can hit, and they have no fear in that Clemson program.
Justin, you saw Clemson up close. You've seen their facilities. What's your thoughts on what Coach Rittman has done there already? This is their second year for Clemson.
I think it's incredibly impressive to me. And you talk about Valerie Cagle there. I think she's probably a year away from being top of the class because of how many of the seniors coming back. But I think I agree with you. I think she's a future player of the year. I saw Clemson early on. I saw them actually in the game where they ended up beating Georgia at home. Had a huge crowd, obviously not a thing this year, but at that point had a huge crowd. But they played really well, and they played like a team that you wouldn't think had only been together for a few months at that point. That's one thing I liked about Clemson is they didn't look like a first-year team. They had their struggles, they had their ups and downs, but they didn't look like a first-year team. And I think that's important. You see John Rittman's veteran coaching there. You bring in some transfers like Marissa Guimbarda from Furman, who have been around for a few years, know their way around, big hitters, big pitchers, etc. But then to have players like Logan Camel and Valerie Cagle come in as freshmen and perform to the level they did, I really like the forecast for Clemson here. I think the next couple of years could be really good for Rittman's club because he's got a nice mix of talent, solid pitching, good offense, but his young players did what they were supposed to do and showed out from day one. And you can't beat that. You really can't beat that.
All right, guys.
The biggest thing also, actually, the biggest thing before we continue, the investment that is being made into the Clemson program, they got a huge, generous, another donation that was announced earlier this week. That sped up their process because not only do you have the coach who understands how to win, who understands to recruit, but you have people who are investing money and finances into the program to get them to where they need to be in the ACC.
Amen to that. Agreed. All right, boys. Who are we picking for the ACC? I'm gonna go Florida State because until you knocked them off, I know Virginia Tech won the regular season 19, but I'm still gonna go with the Noles and give them the benefit of the doubt. But man, it would not surprise me if Virginia Tech won, and it wouldn't surprise me if we have a surprise winner. Because if we were to pick a likely surprise conference champion, I would probably pick the ACC because I think it's that deep, personally. So that's my thoughts on the. Who do you got, Victor?
I'm going with Florida State, but if I had to pick someone outside of Florida State or Virginia Tech, I would say Duke.
Wow. Justin, how do you react to that one?
Well, considering I was about to say the same thing, you kind of stole my thunder there.
Whoa!
Great minds thinking alike once again.
So let me get this straight. Duke can win the ACC in softball and miss the NCAA tournament in men's basketball.
2021, man.
Oh, Marissa Young. Wow, that's bold. Hey, I understand though, Duke. That's not a bad pick there. The ACC tournament will be in Louisville this season there. So those are our Power 5 conference picks. Now, this is the time where we plug ourselves. Coming up on Mondays in the Circle podcast, Justin will be joining me to preview the entire non-Power 5. We got like 19 conferences that we're going to break down in the podcast, me and Justin. But prior to that, we're going to be joined by Amanda Scarborough. Me and her will preview the Power 5. That's on our Monday's edition of In the Circle. And where can they find that, Victor?
You can find it on your favorite streaming platform, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify. You can listen to us, rate and review us 5 stars, please, and thank you. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on our YouTube page, where you can find the replay of our live receiving preview extravaganza right now. And if I'm not mistaken, don't you two have something that you're going to be bringing up on Monday's show that you haven't even put me on about?
We are going to have an announcement. It'll be on that show, and that will be certainly we'll leave it there. Just why you got to tune into Monday. But a big show. We're going to preview up to 20 conferences are going to be previewed there. So that's going to be huge. They are there. We're going to talk about some of the other non-Power 5 teams here in a moment. But, boy, you guys have caused a stir on the chat room. Duke over UNC? Who is pitching for Duke? Those are some of the comments, boys. Justin, do you want to sort of defend the Duke pick there as a sleeper there as far as the ACC title? Some people questioning now as far as their pitching. How do you respond?
Well, you've got Brianna Butler, you've got Peyton St. George. They're both pretty solid pitchers. Now, granted, the thing about Duke is there's still a certain level of, are they for real? Admittedly, that's there. Now, my personal belief is, yes, they are. I think they're a really solid team. I like Butler and St. George in the Circle. I think St. George could probably contend, maybe not now, but if she does well this year, maybe next year type of idea. I think she could ultimately, before her career's done, contend for Conference Pitcher of the Year. I think she's got that kind of talent in her. In terms of Duke over UNC, Pickett's health. As long as Pickett's healthy, she's going to be great. But I have other questions about North Carolina. But in terms of Duke, I can't leave out Caroline Jacobson flat out knocked the cover off the ball last year. Mm-hmm. Kid's got an insane bat. And Duke was – they were in some games. They beat Texas, so you can't say they didn't play anybody. I liked what I saw from Duke. I like what Marissa Young's doing. I just think they've got the I think they've got, I don't want to call it the pedigree because that's the stereotypical word there. But as long as they can sustain the momentum they had last year, I think they've got the pieces to be able to put together to do something this year. And if we're talking sleepers in the ACC, I think they've got to be one of them. I mean, by no means are they the only one I think can win the ACC other than Florida State, but that's the one I was going to highlight for those reasons right there, like the pitching staff, Jacobson on offense, and I think they can put the pieces together in the right way at the right time.
Oh, there we go. I muted myself. That's why you didn't hear me. So,
how do you give yourself a mute button?
I played myself Tony Reale. I was Tony Reale. I wanted to be Tony Reale, and I got to be Tony Reale.
Live podcasting ain't nothing like it, folks.
It was the greatest. All right, so Justin, we mentioned some of the teams there, non-Power 5. You got UCF, top 25 in the American. They're top 25 in every poll. Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, Jerry Glasgow, top 10 in the polls. Of heavy favorites in the Sun Belt, no Megan Kleiss. So who's going to back up Summer Ellison in the rotation? You've got obviously teams like Fresno State, who was beat Texas, was in the top 25 in the end of 2020. The favorites in the Mountain West under Linda Garza, the head coach, Dulcini, the great pitcher. And then you've got teams like Cal State Fullerton in the Big West. They're always in the mix. North Texas, Rodney DeLong with Troutwine in Conference USA. Of all those teams and maybe somebody else, who's the biggest storyline you're intrigued to see in 2021, Justin?
Well, I think the Raging Cajuns is where you've got to start. I mean, on paper, that's an offense that probably comes in just behind UCLA and right around the level of Arizona on paper. Paper doesn't win ball games. Paper doesn't play ball games. But looking at the talent there in terms of the stacked lineup, it's in that category. So I think you got to start there because at the same time, as great as that lineup is, the pitching depth behind Summer Ellison is unknown. I mean, there's arms, there's players, there's members of the roster, etc. But you don't know what that's going to look like. Is Kendra Lamb going to come out there and be a world beater? Is she going to come out there and just eat some innings? You know, somebody like Carly Heath or Vanessa Foreman or etc. You don't know. So there's a huge question mark right alongside the huge exclamation point that is the batting order. And that's an interesting combination for the Cajuns. In terms of storylines, you mentioned Cal State Fullerton. I really like the Big West because I think Long Beach State actually is a really quality contender this year in the Big West. A couple of big transfers coming from San Jose State. Shannon Haddad had a great freshman year.
Oh, drama builds again, Vic.
Ah.
I think Kelly Ford didn't like what Justin was saying. I think Kelly Ford.
You realize? I don't know why you're going to say that about Kelly Ford. She recently brought on Dale O'Toole. Recently brought on Dale O'Toole as a pitching coach. So
they did. That's a great move.
Maybe she did take offense to what I was about to say. Well, remember Long Beach. And we hope to get Justin back on. And there, remember Long Beach State a couple of years ago had Chloe Metza, who was really dominating Long Beach State. She transferred again to Arizona State, so they kind of fell off the map for a couple of years, and now are back trying to get themselves competing in the Big West. One thing I'm looking forward to seeing this year is North Texas with Ronnie DeLong and Hope Troutwine. This is a team that has really made strides. They knocked off Louisiana. They knocked off Oklahoma each of the last two seasons. And I feel if North Texas gets in a right draw, particularly if they have to travel to Austin to play Texas, they could be a team that ends up playing in a regional championship game. And they had the pitcher at Hope Troutwine who could win them a regional, similar to what we almost saw with North Carolina with Brittany Pickett.
That's bold. We got Justin back. You may have angered Fullerton fans. I don't know what Justin happened there, but he got knocked out there.
Kelly Ford cut off his internet.
But go ahead. You talk about the Big West. Let's preview the Big West here now because we're going to preview the American, the Sun Belt, Conference USA. All the other leagues are going to be on Monday's podcast, but we're going to give you a little taste of that here by giving you the Big West right now. You're saying Long Beach over Fullerton?
Well, I agree. I think it was the greatest 90 seconds of my analysis you've never heard. Nobody will ever know what I said. Honestly, if I'm picking Long Beach over Fullerton. I like the talent Long Beach put together. Long Beach is never out of the race anyway. They're always right there in that race, and Fullerton usually just wins out. And it's honestly not a shot on Fullerton, even though they lost a lot of talent in their senior class, in players who weren't able to come back. And at the same time they did that, Long Beach goes out and adds players like Susie Brookshire and Shannon Haddad from San Jose, who performed well. Now, Brookshire's on her third college. We've talked, I think it's the third player tonight that's had that distinction when it used to be non-existent. But Haddad had a really quality freshman year at San Jose State. And the Mountain West is no slouch of a conference. So, I'm excited to see what she can do at Long Beach State. And Kelly White's back for the super senior year. So you put White and Haddad together, that's a really solid 1-2 in the circle for Long Beach State. And again, at the same time that Fullerton loses a lot of seniors. So I think the Big West is a fun conference generally anyway, and they even add another team this year in UC San Diego to whatever level that's going to be. But I think if I'm picking, I think I'm picking Long Beach over Fullerton because I think Long Beach added talent at the same time that Fullerton lost some talent, and I see Long Beach being in a position to take advantage of that.
Wow, bold there. Does that mean 2-bid league, or you think Fullerton's out, not making the tournament as a result?
I mean, I could see Fullerton still making the tournament. It is
Okay.
Fullerton. But I think one thing about this year, I think it's going to be a struggle for leagues like that to get 2 teams in without the opportunity for Fullerton to go out and beat, UCLA, go out and beat UCLA, Oregon, Florida State, etc. I think it's going to make it a much tougher journey if they were going to try to be a 2-bid league this year.
Comments saying Odyssey Alexander is the real deal and is a two-way player. That's JMU's deal there. Now, obviously, JMU, we'll touch on JMU a lot on the podcast, but let's give your thoughts on JMU. I didn't mention them in the Colonial. They're always a team that's always in the mix as well. But some questions for Coach Laporte and the Dukes this year.
Yeah, and the way the CAA is set up this year, splitting into the North and South divisions, and JMU's schedule too is very regionally based this year, if you notice, which takes away the opportunity that JMU usually has to get a couple of marquee wins in the early non-conference portion of the season, which really usually goes a long way to propelling them in postseason play. You don't have that this year. But granted, they can still get some wins over good teams in conference, etc. At the same time, similar to what I was saying a minute ago in the Big West, you've got a Delaware team that performed really well in the CAA last year. Delaware's got a lot of pieces back. So does JMU. Got Alexander coming back fully healthy from reports and ready to go. You got Kate Gordon, who's about as good as they come, one of the best players in the nation. So you've got the talent still there. So JMU's not going away by any means. And yes, Alexander can hit and pitch, which is a dying art. So JMU still got the talent. JMU still got the players we're used to seeing star for them. But I'll say this, the CAA schedule, the splitting of the conference into divisions, and then just JMU's schedule in general didn't do them any favors this year because, again, you don't have the opportunity to get the big marquee wins in Clearwater or at Mary Nutter or wherever. You've got the players coming back, but you don't even have a chance in the regular season to play the second best team, maybe the best team, we don't know, in the conference in Delaware because of the way the division's split. So I think JMU's scheduling this year, by virtue of the pandemic and everything that came from it, I think it hurt them. I really do. I think it hurt them.
Very interesting there. Victor, I want to ask about 2 leagues you follow closely and actually cover. The A-Sun, Liberty, the Kennesaw State, very deep league, questions whether it could be multiple bid league or not. And then the American, UCF, as I mentioned, top 25 preseason, the favorites in the league. South Florida's the defending regular season champions with reigning 2-time pitcher of the year, Georgina Corrick. And Houston, what's your thoughts on those 2 leagues?
Starting with the American, Eric, I really feel it's going to be UCF's conference to lose. You get everybody back, starting with Aaliyah White, who has been tremendous. They've gotten a staff around her that has been very, very potent. We saw them up close in person last year. And I feel offensively for UCF, this is one of the better offenses that they've had in quite some time in that program. Georgia Blair has been a godsend for the middle of that order. You got someone who can hit for power, and could do a lot of damage in the middle of that lineup. The biggest key for UCF, and Eric, you'll expound on this more with Justin on Monday, is can they win when they don't get that long ball? Can they win those 2-1, 3-2, 3-1 games that UCF was built on when they were getting started as a program? And of course, USF, always a question with Coach Erickson, who is back on the team after his commitments to Team USA, was supposed to be an Olympic year. Can they get some help behind Georgina Corrick as a number 2, and can they get some offense? That's always been the question I feel with USF for the last few years. Can they get a number 2? Can they get some offense? Because UCF right now has everything they need to win the American and to potentially do some damage in the postseason.
What's your thoughts on the A-Sun?
The A-Sun, it's so fascinating because I feel Liberty is going to be Liberty's the favorite without question with Dr. Dot Richardson, but you got Kennesaw State who's going to be a threat. North Alabama had a very strong year in an abbreviated year. They got a lot of good pitching back. And I feel that Lipscomb and FGCU, it's going to be a competitive league in the A-Sun this year. And they're also going to the divisional format like Justin alluded to, what the CAA is doing. So you're having all the Florida teams playing in the South Division, and you're having Kennesaw, Liberty, Lipscomb all battling out in the North Division. And then you're going to have like a divisional playing to get to the conference tournament. So if Florida Gulf Coast can take care of business, they should clean up in the South Division, but keep an eye out for Stetson. Lizzie Schubert balled out in the summer league this past summer. Grace Sorrow, close in person, she'll tell you more about her. And you got a sophomore pitcher, Lauren Hobbs, who pitched very, very well as a freshman in her limited time. So Stetson could be a team that could challenge potentially FGCU in that Southern Division. But until somebody finds a way to knock off Liberty, it's still going to be the Flames' A-Sun to lose.
It's going to be very interesting. We'll get into that more detail, Justin, on Monday's podcast. Again, Monday's podcast, In the Circle. Amanda Scarborough will join us. We'll break down, preview the 2021 season. Justin will be on that episode. We'll break down up to 20 conferences, 19 to 20 conferences will be broken down on that podcast. The only podcast that does that in the sport, period. That's on Monday. And you guys mentioned Cindy Ball-Malone and UCF's offense. Coach Ball-Malone will be on In the Circle later this week, as well as possibly a national champion head coach could be joining us this week.
We're announcing guests left and right. We're making guest announcements, and we're still wow.
It's live, baby. That's what happens when you go live. You know, when I'm not muting myself.
Wow.
Yes. That's what happens.
And missing the greatest 90 seconds we ever heard.
It was really good. All right. Let's wrap this up a little bit here. Let's do some – this is it, boys. We do this – I don't know how many years we've done this season preview.
This is our 6th year we've done the season preview.
And, of course, we do bold picks. Bold picks. We're going to pick who's going to Oklahoma City, who's winning the national title, player of the year, but also a bold pick, a surprising pick that you're like, whoa, that's a out of left field pick. Like, I'll start with that. Just not my bold prediction. The American and the Mountain West will be a higher rated RPI conference than the Big Ten. And don't be surprised. Don't be shocked if they all have the same amount of teams in the tournament.
That would not surprise me in the slightest. That really wouldn't surprise me, particularly with the Mountain West, the way they've been playing the last few years.
Yep. Vic, what do you got? You got a bold pick?
Oh, yeah, I got a bold prediction. I got the Clemson Tigers not just making the NCAA tournament. I got Clemson going to the Super Regional. How about that for a bold prediction?
Whoa.
Yes, you heard. Yes. I see the looks on your faces. Clemson going to the Supers. Now, of course, it has to account for the right draw. But they got the offense. I like what Cagle did last year, and never count out a coach in John Redmond who knows what it was like to be at the top of the mountain. My bold prediction, the Clemson Tigers going to Super Regionals. If you excuse me, I see to hear Dabo Sweeney knocking on my door.
Wow. Justin, good luck. Follow that.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that here. Okay, well, so I was going to go similarly, but I mean, I guess I got to change things up. And I wasn't going to say Clemson. Don't get me wrong. My bold prediction was going to be Supers. I'll say this: I don't think all the seeded teams, in whatever short shape or form the tournament takes on, I think we see at least 2 surprise teams in the Supers. Now, my teams in the Supers are Arkansas and Oregon. I think both of them challenged to go to the World Series. That's about as bold as I'm getting. I'm not quite to Clemson to the Supers level yet. But I think Arkansas and Oregon could both challenge to go to the World Series.
Wow. So you're with Fowler on Oregon about Super Regionals there, making a deep run, and then you're on the bandwagon with Arkansas. Scarborough, Gray, everybody. Arkansas bandwagon. Courtney Dyfel and company.
Yeah, I mean, I like the offense, and I think the pitching talent's there.
That's bold. I like that. That's pretty great. All right, Player of the Year. Rachel Garcia has a chance to make history. If she were to win Player of the Year this year, it would be her third of her career, matching Kat Osterman for the most in NCAA college softball D1 history. I'm not going that route, though. I'm going to go, and I'm going to go with Jessie Harper. I think it's her year. She breaks the home run record, picks up big numbers. Going to go with her. Going with the historical numbers there. I'm going with her. That's my. I don't know if you consider that a bold pick or not, but I'm going to go with Harper as the national player of the year. Victor?
I'm going to go with, and this may give you a clue as to who I may be picking to win the national championship this year. She didn't pitch to her standards in 2019. And when her coach says this is the best version of her that he's seen, I'm not counting out Patrick Murphy. So I'm going to go with Montana Fouts as my national pitcher of the year.
Justin shaking it, rolling his head there a little bit. You've rattled him, Vic. Here, you've rattled him.
I've been rattling a few cages the last 2 days.
You're making me follow Vic.
We've been doing this for how long now, Justin?
Go ahead, Justin.
Okay, year number 7 is going to have to be a new rule. I can't follow Vic on everything.
Wow, you're dodging the question,
Drop
Justin.
my pen.
You're dodging the question here.
Well, in all honesty, Jessie Harper's my pick. It's not very bold, and I think it's for the exact reason you said, Eric, because I think she breaks the home run record. And, I mean, I think it's one of those things where, Garcia is as good as she's going to be. We all know how good Garcia is. We know how good Harper is, but sometimes that extra level of breaking the all-time record, et cetera, which, again, I think she'll do, sometimes that's the difference maker. So Jessie Harper's my pick for National Player of the Year. Again, like you, Eric, I don't know how bold that is, but it's where I'm going.
We got people in the chat agreeing with Vic on Fouts. Hey,
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Justin. Since I'm going to give you grant your wish. You get to go first this time. Give me your Women's College World Series teams. There you go.
I mean, I'm tempted to say Clemson just for the shock factor, but I didn't pick Clemson to the World Series.
Wow.
Oh,
wow.
boy.
Wow.
Wow. That's gonna stick with me for a minute.
We're gonna need a moment.
I'm gonna have to find a way to get in the middle of the picture between Vic and Justin here. Holy smokes!
I don't know how that's gonna happen. Wow. We're gonna need a standing 8 count after that. Hey, man.
Okay, so
Justin just threw.
Go ahead, Justin.
Okay, so my World Series picture not horribly original, but I think too, as crazy as this year is going to be, and the different factors that are going to go into it, and even as deep as some of these conferences are, I don't think it's necessarily World Series. But I don't think it's necessarily going to be a year of a lot of surprises. So obviously, I went UCLA, Washington, Arizona, Oklahoma. That's Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, both as a matter of fact. No Texas. And three SEC teams, LSU, Alabama, Florida. I've only got 3 conferences getting teams in because I think it's going to be survival of the fittest, and those are who I think are the deepest teams. All of them have similar traits in terms of, got multiple pitchers they can rely on, got good offensive pieces, got deep lineups. I think teams like Oregon, Arkansas, Florida State, ULL, I think they challenge for the World Series, but I think at the end of the day it comes down to those 8, 3 Pac, 3 SEC, 2 Big 12s for me.
Vic?
Well, I'm in agreement with Justin for 7 of his 8. I agree with him. UCLA, Arizona, Washington. I agree with Oklahoma. I agree with Alabama, LSU, and I agree with Oklahoma State. Where I slightly differ with him is I got Louisiana in the Women's College World Series, not Florida. And the only difference is in the sport of softball is always gearing towards the offense. And find me an offense outside of UCLA that has more pop, that has more depth, that has more speed, and can have more bats off the bench than what Coach Glasgow has in Louisiana. And all he needs his pitchers to do is just get them some quality outs and let the offense take care of the rest. And I think the addition of Bryant and Justice Mills to that lineup is going to put them over the top. And I got ULL or Louisiana going to Oklahoma City.
Well, the only negative about that is I actually agree with Victor in Louisiana, so that's a problem. That's a problem there.
Lord.
I do think,
Lord.
and by the way, I do think there will be a non-power 5, quote unquote, in Oklahoma City, and it may not be the Cajuns, but I will pick the Cajuns because what everything Vic said was perfectly. And I do think Jerry and that staff, they'll find enough innings behind Summer to figure it out. And that offense. Mm-hmm. And the key, though, I think you would agree with this, Victor, they've got to try to be in that top 8. If they could get into that top 8 and have host, you know, and we don't know what the postseason will look like, but if they could be up to Lafayette, host regionals and supers, that's the path. I don't know if they can win on the road, but that's the path I'm banking on. We'll see if that plays itself out. Obviously, I got UCLA, Arizona, Washington, LSU, Alabama, Florida, and Oklahoma as well with that. Those are my teams as well. I think Oklahoma State could get back. I would have had Texas in if LSU was still on the team. I'm with Kenzie, and I do have questions about Texas. Gray brought it up. O'Leary. And I think they can get in as well. It wouldn't shock me if it came down to a lot Louisiana, Texas Supers for that spot, by the way. Wouldn't that be something? So I think it's a corner. I'm going to lean towards Louisiana. I would have gone Texas if LSU was on the team. I'm going with Louisiana, but it's a flip of a coin. So I do, and I think Oklahoma State, I would throw them in there as well. But I will go with UCLA, Arizona, Washington, LSU, Alabama, Florida, and Oklahoma there. So that's the depth there. And then the big one now, who will win the national title? Justin, I'll start with you since you don't want to go after Vic.
Clemson's good. No, I'm kidding.
No. You're going to hear the whole year about this one, Vic. I have a feeling.
I know.
Yeah. This one, I'm going to give you who I've got playing in my championship series, and that might be the boldest I get all night. I've got Washington and LSU in the championship series. Washington, been there a couple of times, but championship drought since the Daniel Murray years. LSU hadn't won one under Beth Torino. They've been there 4 times. And when it comes down to it, actually, this is as bold as I'm going to go. I think this might be LSU's year. It's the deepest their pitching staff's been. They've got offensive weapons: Georgia Clark, Taylor Pleasance, Shelby Sinceri, if she's back to her normal her 2019 self, not what she was in 2020. I think there's a lot of talent on the LSU roster, and if they can run the gamut in the SEC, which I think they can, playing the non-conference against Alabama, even though not in in the conference schedule. I think it's LSU's year. Finally get Beth Torino her ring.
Vic?
I really like that LSU pick, and especially if you can get Shelby Sinceri playing and particularly pitching the way she did back in 2019, because she's also a two-way threat. I like, as much as I want to pick UCLA with all that firepower, something tells me that the people of Tuscaloosa won more national championships. They were so close in 2019. They lost that if game in Oklahoma that would have got them to UCLA. You got Fouts back healthy. You got a very motivated team. And I feel Alabama is, I don't want to say being disrespected, but they're not being given their proper due. because everyone's talking about the Pac-12 and, of course, Oklahoma and Texas. So I got UCLA taking on Alabama, and I'm going to quote Stephen A. Smith and say, "Roll Tide." Bama wins the national championship.
Wow. Well, me and Vic again agree, except for one thing. There's just one thing me and Vic just. You can't roll Tide on a Bruin bubble. I got UCLA over Alabama in the national championship. Am I really the only one taking UCLA? Really? You guys are giving me UCLA, and you guys are taking the field. Thank you.
I'm sure the Bruin bubble and Jen Schroeder will be appreciative of you picking them.
Hey, darn right. It's pretty wild. I just got to see who could beat them. I got to see them. Who can beat them 2 times in a row with as deep as they are with now Garcia, who I think is motivated not just to win another national title, but also be ready for the Olympics, hopefully, fingers crossed, and hope to bring gold to the United States. I think she's going to be driven. I think she's going to be a beast. And I think that team is going to be a beast. And I think they're going to be motivated. And I think they want to make history. And I don't know if this counts as back-to-back, but it's history, one way or the other. That's my thought. But Alabama's a good pick, Vic. I think that's good. And I think LSU is a good pick, too. I would not be surprised if we just named 3 of the 4 Final Four teams and maybe Washington being that 4th Final Four team in Oklahoma City.
Well, guys, we got some picks in the chat. We got Steve, who's got an all Pac-12 final. He has UCLA versus Washington. Jason says Bama will play UCLA, so he agrees with Eric and I. Jason has concerns about Washington's pitching staff, saying they're not deep enough in the circle. But I tell you what, they had that freshman in Washington. If she can pitch well to go along with Gabby playing, it wouldn't surprise me if Washington did make it to the championship series.
Right. What do you think about that, Justin? Is that valid? That you buy that Washington not as deep pitching staff? Is that a valid concern?
I think they're deep in terms of arms. I'm not going to say I disagree completely, though, that I've still got some questions there. I think they're in a similar situation to some of the teams we've talked about already. Plain's the easy, obvious number 1. There's talent behind her, but who's number 2? Who's going to be able to be a legitimate number 2? That's where I find a serious question. And I agree. I think there's still some things that need to be ironed out for that. I do.
I'm kind of concerned, Justin, with that as well. I'm surprised nobody's mentioned Arizona in the championship picks. Of course, they got the big 3 with Deja, APC, Jesse Harper. Does Arizona have the pitching? I know they have Mariah Lopez. Do they have enough pitching that maybe they can assert themselves to play for the national title?
The pitching in Arizona is my big qualm there. I feel like we've talked about pitching in every team, be that being the big strong piece or the weak piece, and I think there's reason for that. But Kenzie talked about it earlier, but that pitching staff at Arizona is my big question there, because we see the batting order. We see Jesse Harper. We see Alyssa Palomino Cardoza. We see even the freshmen like Carlos Cupin, who's supposed to be really solid, heavy hitter, etc. A lot of talent, a lot of experience. In the pitching staff, you have the talent, you have the experience, but you don't necessarily have the results over time. And that's where I question there. You know, if let's say we get to the World Series, Arizona's there. Gabby Plain's out there. I know what I'm getting from Gabby Plain. Rachel Garcia's out there. I know what I'm getting from Rachel Garcia. Megan Ferramo, I'm pretty sure we know what we're getting from Megan Ferramo. Mariah Lopez, Alyssa Denham, do we? Are we confident to throw one of them against one of the other teams, UCLA, Washington, LSU, Alabama? Are we confident that there's going to be a victory there? And I don't think you can say that. So my big question about Arizona is it's a large question mark. Not the first team I've said it about tonight. It's the pitching staff. If Denham and Lopez can form not just a solid 1-2, but like a quality go in there, beat other people 1-2, well, then Arizona's immediately vaulted higher in the conversation. But until I see that, I can't put them at the top of the top.
And I agree with you with that on Justin. And you can kind of say the same thing for Florida, because we don't know who their number one is going to be. I know we saw some great things out of Natalie Lugo a couple of years ago, and they did lose a pitcher who transferred out. But I feel Florida's kind of like Arizona. They have the offense with Eccles, with Lindemann, and what they've gotten from Hannah Adams. Do they have the pitching to try to be in that mix, or are they kind of like Arizona where they can get there, but they don't have the arms to get them over that hump to win that championship?
I'm just happy we have questions.
Here's the thing about Florida.
By the way, Justin, I just wanted to throw that out there. But go ahead, Justin.
Right. Well, my thing about Florida, and it's odd because I picked them to the World Series, but if you remember a couple of years ago, Kelly Barnhill has a 500 record, which we're so not used to seeing. Florida looks like a dismal team. They go into the SEC tournament. They get all the way to the end. They end up with a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. Florida just finds a way. Tim Walton finds a way. How he does it, what his secret sauce is, what genie he pulls out of the bottle, I don't know, but he somehow manages to do it. So that's the reason, honestly, that I picked him to the World Series, because I have a lot of questions about Florida, rooted in the pitching staff, but also kind of in general. Natalie Lugo's there, Elizabeth Hightower's there, Trilachek's there. The talent's there, the arms are there, the ability is there. I'm just, and I say this realizing that I picked him to the World Series, so I'm not trying to contradict myself here. And I think they'll find a way to get there. I wouldn't have picked them, but I have so many questions about that. I'm not sure Tim Walton doesn't have questions about that. We've all interviewed and we've all heard interviews. We've all talked to him, all that kind of stuff. I think they find a way. I'm just not sure how they find it.
Oh, they find a way. And Vic, it's just, we know how this is going to end. It's going to end. Kyle Crooks is going to call off a dramatic walk-off. He's going to be a great call in Florida with, right? That's it, right? Can we just call it now?
He's 2 for 2 in calling dramatic walk-offs in game 3s to get Florida to Oklahoma City. It's just a matter of 1, which SEC team will he do it against, and 2, which player will hit the walk-off. Do you want to make any guesses on who that will be this year?
Oh, wow. I'll let you guys go with that. If you want to bonus.
Yeah. bonus bold pick. So
I'm gonna go Cottrell. I'm gonna go Cottrell. Cottrell's my pick.
Cottrell against who?
It will be an SEC team. I'm not gonna say Tennessee. On behalf of the weeklies, please give them somebody else. Please, like every time. Why does it have to be Tennessee? Give them somebody else if you're gonna do that. Now, first of all, you shouldn't do it. In fact, how about this for a bold pick? Bold pick? Maybe this is the year that Florida doesn't play an SEC team. Maybe they play somebody from the Sunshine State in the Supers. Huh? Let's just table that. But I'm going to go Cottrell if they do play an SEC team.
Okay.
Vic is like speechless.
I don't know what's more shocking. The fact that you don't have it against an SEC team, we have a team from the state of Florida playing in Supers against Florida. If they do it against an SEC team, I'm going to go Charlotte Eccles.
All right.
And I will say it will be against, Georgia. Get a little payback for costing them that chance for the 3-2 in 2016.
All right, that's good. All right. There you go. Justin, you going to go with one?
I'll go Hannah Adams.
That's a good one.
I like Hannah Adams this year.
That's a good one. All right, well, we'll see what happens. Hopefully we get to that point. Let's get to that point. Look, obviously it's going to be an interesting challenge. Games will probably be postponed, canceled. It's going to be up and down, but hopefully everybody kind of gets through it, and hopefully have an exciting season. I think it has the potential to be an exciting year with a lot of players back that we didn't expect to be back, obviously with the extra year eligibility. So that's going to do it for this live show. However, we're not done previewing the season, folks.
No, we're not.
Mondays in the circle, ladies and gentlemen. Amanda Scarborough will be on the show. I'm going to go an hour with Scarborough. We're going to talk SEC, Pac-12, ACC. It's Amanda's in depth and her thoughts on the big picture in the 2021 season. And then Justin is going to join me for another hour We're going to talk American Conference, Sun Belt, Mountain West, you name it. We got like 19 conferences that we're going to discuss on that podcast, not including the Big West, which we gave you a taste tonight. Think about that, Victor. Up to 20 conferences, 19 to 20 conferences between these two previews here. Hello.
And you're going to find out only here on In the Circle. And also, if you go to Justin's World, you'll find some exclusive content there. He gives his annual breakdown of each and every conference, what players to look for, what teams to look for. Justin, where can you find that tremendous content that you continuously put out, sir?
Well, that's very kind of you, Vic. We're just about to wrap up our conference forecast for this year. As a matter of fact, the whole Power 5 runs on Monday. So all of my predictions and write-ups, it's all on Monday on Power 5. But got all kinds of preseason content. This week's going to be packed. And it's all at justinsworldsb.com, and then Justin's World of Softball on Facebook and Justin's World SB on Twitter.
And there'll be some new content on Justin's World that'll be announced on Mondays in the Circle podcast.
Yes.
Victor doesn't even know what it is.
I have no clue. I really don't.
And you're the producer.
You didn't even tell me what it is.
That's why you got to tune in. Even you got to tune in. By the way, some people talking Oklahoma. Are we making a mistake? Have we dismissed Oklahoma? None of us picked Oklahoma at all in Oklahoma City there. Are we making a mistake there?
Considering that it's kind of their second residence. Look, a healthy G Juarez, anything is possible.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we might. Oh boy, that's my concern now. That we might look back on this video, Victor, like fourth at the end there in Oklahoma City, and we're like, man, Oklahoma's back in the title game. Who'd have thought? And then we're like, yeah, none of us picked them. Great, that could happen, no doubt.
Yeah, a lot of people talking about Nicole May, the freshman, and maybe be that number 2 with G Juarez. That is going to be a problem for the Big 12 and all the college softball.
All right, well. We might hear it from Sooner Nation. Justin might, especially if you guys go to Oklahoma City, you might never hear the end of it. Hopefully yes. That means but that'll be good news. Hopefully that's good news because that means we're kind of close to normal. So I hope it happens just because if you're both there, that means we're in a better place, right? So that's how we're going to do it.
Agreed.
Right. All right, that'll do it, folks. Thanks again to Kinsey Fowler, Pac-12 analyst. Awesome, great former Wildcat, great. She'll be joining us in the Circle throughout the year when we talk Pac-12. Gray Robertson. Oh, Vic, where do they find their podcast?
Find them on out-of-the-box_pod. They also have their season preview on Monday. They will also have Amanda Scarborough on their podcast on Monday. I mean, Amanda Scarborough is everywhere, so
she's kind of a big deal.
Shout out to her.
Shout out.
Except on Justin's World.
Yes.
Except Justin's World. Can't have it. She can't do every show or everybody, publications. But she was great. She'll be on Monday's podcast with us and then with them as well. But thanks to Gray for joining us. Thank you, Justin, though, for joining us here for a couple hours. And obviously you'll be back with us on Monday on In the Circle. We're going to go probably another hour or so. That's what we do here. And then, heck, we'll have another 2-hour show. So, and thank you to all the fans tuning in. We hope you make sure you subscribe and like In the Circle on YouTube. We're going to have a lot of video content. You see it right now. Beth Tarina interviews with Kat Osterman. We're going to have other content. My interview with Cindy Ball Malone will be there, among other different stuff. We'll be doing some live shows here and there throughout the season in different levels. Fingers crossed that things go well in Division II, and we might actually do some Division II talk. And that's why Victor. That's the only reason why.
That's the real reason why you can't see me now, because I am shedding tears.
Yeah.
Thinking about the fact that I did not get a chance to talk about Division II on the podcast like I usually do the last few years. So I know my heart is broken and I haven't really recovered from that yet.
That's correct. On that. And shout out, hey, Big Ten, feel free to come out with a schedule anytime now. Feel free.
Yes, please and thank you.
On that note, for Victor Anderson, for Justin McLeod, for Kinsey Fowler, for Gray Robertson, I'm Eric Lopez. We hope you've enjoyed this live edition of In the Circle as we preview the 2021 season. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a review. And tune into our podcast Mondays and Thursdays. Monday, Amanda Scarborough and Justin McLeod will be on that show. And then later in the week, Cindy Ball Malone will be joining us from UCF and possibly a national champion head coach. Another one, Vic.
All right, DJ Khaled, sign off the show, sir.
Good night, everybody. And let's play some softball. Good night.